Notre Dame fans, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, September 8th, and it is time to slowly start turning the corner a little bit. We still have some stuff on the website breaking down the Florida State game, but it is time, at least on the YouTube side of things, to start really transitioning to this matchup this weekend against Toledo. And we're going to begin with our stacking up feature where we look at the Notre Dame offense and how it stacks up against the Toledo defense. And this is going to be a very intriguing matchup. This is a very, very well-coached football team from Toledo, a team that saw dramatic improvement from 2019 to 2020 once they hired one of the best coaches at the Division III level in Vince Karras, son of legendary coach Larry Karras, who was the head coach at Mount Union. Vince also won multiple national championships there. This is a Toledo defense that's going to be well coached. It's a Toledo defense that had a very good start to the season against an FCS opponent, which is they did what they were supposed to do against an FCS opponent.
I mean, they dominated.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what you need them to do. And it's a defense that, as I mentioned, went from giving up 32.2 points per game in 2019, gave up 475.7 yards per offense in 2019, to then in year one under Vince Karras, dropped that all the way down to 362 yards per game and 24.3 points per game. Now, they only played 6 games last year. It was an all-MAC schedule, which means there was no Power 5 team on the schedule. But it also means they didn't get a game in like Murray State like they got in the year before, where they beat Murray State 45-0. So gave up 32.2 points per game, but that included a 45-0 victory over Murray State. So you didn't have that either. So I think it is a good representation of how well they improved. They had the number 3 scoring defense in the MAC last year. They had the number 2 total defense in the MAC last year after being one of the worst defenses in the MAC the year before. Some transfers on there. There's a name that Notre Dame fans are going to remember. Their starting middle linebacker, his second-year starter, is Jonathan Jones. Notre Dame fans should remember him from, obviously, he was a recruit as part of the 2016 class for Notre Dame. So we're going to break down this matchup today. This is going to be Ashley Hill wants to start things off with a super chat, which we appreciate.
Absolutely.
Love you guys.
That's awesome.
We love you too,
Thank
Ashley.
you.
Appreciate it very, very much. But what we're going to do, Vince, this is going to be sort of we're just going to do the podcast. We're not going to have much of a Q&A afterwards. We're just going to dive right in. So if there's something you want to ask about this matchup, obviously we'd love to hear it, but just leave a super chat. Otherwise, we kind of got to stick to this analysis because we got to get rocking and rolling. So I want to dive in first, Vince. I think the biggest, before we dive into the statistical matchup, and we're one game in, so we're still going to look at 2020 stat things while also then keeping an eye on what happened in game one. And that's going to make it really interesting because where Notre Dame was strong last year, they weren't strong against Florida State.
Exactly,
and we'll dive into what that means, but also that this is a game where Notre Dame needs to get right in those areas. And that's what this presents. And the reason I like this matchup more than, let's say, like a Bowling Green or New Mexico, some team that's just terrible, is I feel like you're going to have a better sense of, did you make that progress against a team like Toledo? Now, is Toledo a team that should beat Notre Dame? No. Is Toledo a team that should be really competitive for 4 quarters Notre Dame? Absolutely not. But they are good enough and well coached enough to where if you have success running the ball, if you have success throwing the ball, if you have success scoring points, it's going to be a good sign for you. It's going to tell you that you made some progress, and it'll set you up for that opportunity to make those improvements against Purdue. And that's what I like about this matchup, Vince.
Absolutely. And the thing that, we know what Notre Dame needs to work on offensively, right? They have to get better in the run game. They have to get better at protecting Jack Cohn, allowing him to do the things that we think that he can do well, and that at times he showed that he could do well in the Florida State game. And this is an opportunity not only to just physically dominate your opponent potentially, but to do it in a manner that it's clear that they looked at last week's film and they said, look, these are the things that we need to get better at. And then to get better at, it doesn't matter who your opponent is. You can tell if a team is fundamentally strong. Right. It doesn't matter. If they're firing off the football, if they're dominating the line of scrimmage, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. You can see that that's occurring, right? Because that did not occur against Florida State 99% of the time. And so if they're doing that against Toledo, that tells me that, okay, they kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit. They realized what they didn't do well, and it's an area of focus for this game and hopefully games moving forward. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be able to tell when you're playing an opponent like Toledo is, are they focusing on those fundamental things that we had issue with in game one?
I may not care as much if they blow Toledo off the ball. This is a very undersized defense. I mean, if you look at their two deep, to your point though, but it's not the blowing off the ball that I care about, and I know you don't care about. It's the technique required and the mentality required to blow them off the ball. Because we saw in 2018 they didn't blow Ball State off the ball, right?
Exactly.
And had they blown Ball State off the ball, it wouldn't have made me feel better about the line because that's what you're supposed to do. It's more of is your communication correct? Are you doing the things you need to do to make sure that you're not letting guys just run free untouched, right? That didn't have anything to do with Florida State's guys being so good. It had to do with them just not handling business and not knowing who they're supposed to block. That is one of those things that is going to factor into, okay, are they making progress?
Yeah, and for me, it's more firing off the ball than it is blowing them off the ball. Exactly. Does that make sense? It's
exactly.
Getting out of your stance. And
because they could. I mean, look, let's talk. Let's dive, Vince. I think that's a great segue. Let's begin this by going right into the Notre Dame rush offense against the Toledo rush defense, because I think that conversation that you're about to have is going to be very appropriate for this part of this breakdown. And so this is last year's statistics. This is Notre Dame's rush offense from last year, which ranked 24th nationally in yards per game, ranked 29th in yards per attempt, one of the best rushing touchdowns in the country in regards to scoring, against the Toledo defense that made dramatic improvement from where it was 2 years ago. In 2019, for example, if you look at Toledo's defense that year, they gave up 218.42 yards per game that season. That included they gave up 133 to Murray State, 289 to Colorado State, 374 to Ball State, 331 to Buffalo, 289 to Central Michigan, 232 against Illinois. The reason I'm reading off all of these MAC statistics to you is because they weren't just last year improving because they only had to play MAC teams.
Sure.
They gave up more than 150 yards rushing last year once.
Yeah.
Twice in 6 games, right? Didn't end the season off great against Central Michigan, gave up 197, but they held Eastern Michigan to 34. Eastern Michigan is a good football team for the MAC. Held Ball State, who won the conference last year as a very good rushing team, to 143 yards, but 2.92 yards per carry. That is a significant jump in one period of time. And that's certainly a great sign of improvement in year one under Vince Karras and we talked about this when we did our summer preview of Toledo, with no offseason for Vince Karras. Right. No time because of COVID, no time to really get the players going. Now he's had that, and you're going to see an improved football team. We got another super chat from SJ. Can't wait till Saturday comes. Indy is lucky to have you guys. I don't think they feel that way, but we like the fact that you feel that way.
Thanks, SJ.
We appreciate your super chat very, very much.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
That's a huge jump in 1 year.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, it's the no off season. It's we talked about the fact that it was the worst possible time to take over a program, right? I mean, it just absolutely was. And to try, even if it's your second year, it's the worst possible time. Not that COVID's ever a good time to infiltrate your program, but, first year, second year, I feel like those are the 2 years where you're really still establishing your identity. And if you don't have that time,
Notre Dame handled COVID so well because they were such a veteran team.
Right. Absolutely correct.
And they had coordinators that had been there. There was nothing new that they had to learn.
And the guys even have talked about the fact of how difficult COVID was. And that was on a team that, you're right, had all kinds of veterans, had guys on the coaching staff that had been there. They had everything in place that they needed, and it still went great. And that is a testament to what Notre Dame can do, and it should make people appreciate what they have on the other side, when you're talking about other teams.
And so Toledo didn't have that ability, but they still made a big jump on defense. And I think that's something that impressed me about this football team. And again, what you're going to see from this team on Saturday, Vince, is going to be a very well-coached team. But let's be honest about something else. Vince Karras is not used to having the least talented team on the football field, right? I mean, he was at Mount Union. He never had the least talented team on the field. He same thing last year for Toledo. They always had a pretty talented football team that they could have some success with. When you look at this situation, they're not gonna just line up and do what they do. they're not just going to line up and say, hey, we're a 4-2 team. And they've kind of got their depth chart's kind of weird because it's listed as it's listed almost like kind of like a 2-4-5. They list 2 outside linebackers, 2 D tackles, 2 linebackers, a nickel, and then 4 DBs. It's really a hybrid 4-down from what I've seen. That they're going to have basically 4 guys in the line of scrimmage, no matter
like
what.
2 stand-up guys on the outside.
Kind of, yeah. And a lot of times that one of those quote-unquote outside linebackers will put his hand in the ground.
Okay.
And sometimes both of them will put their hand in the ground. So, the depth chart's going to tell you a story that doesn't necessarily show up on film. But the point is, the one thing that is for certain is they're not real big. Their front 4 guys are listed at 250, 290, 255, and 235, right? The 290 guys, Judge Culpepper, that's a name of Notre Dame fans might remember. He was a guy that Notre Dame recruited a little bit several years ago, ended up not pushing for. They recruited him as a tight end. He went to Penn State to play D-line, ended up transferring from Penn State, never made a whole much of an impact, but good solid player. But he's 290. That's their biggest guy in the starting lineup. Now, they have some size in the 2 deep, but their starting lineup is small. And even if they're not small, Jonathan Jones, we remember him. Their linebackers are 230, 225. Their nickelbacks 195. They have 3 guys in their lineup over 250 pounds, right? And so, and 1 guy over 260. They're not going to line up and say, hey, this is what we do. Let's line up and play sound defense. They're going to attack. And I actually think, Vince, that's a good thing for Notre Dame in regards to its evolution as an offense, because just lining up and blowing Toledo off the balls doesn't show you anything.
Doesn't do anything for you.
Right.
I mean,
having to handle all those twists and stunts and that's exactly what Ball State did to Notre Dame in 2019. Yep. They were not prepared for those twists and stunts. Jeff Quinn's going to have to do a much better job of getting this team ready for all the twists and stunts. And look, Toledo's going to twist and stunt. I'm watching film of their Ball State game last year, and they were twisting and stunting and slanting against a team that they matched up with size-wise. They're definitely going to bring some exotic stuff.
That's just what they do.
Yeah, right. You're going to see corner fires. You're going to see linebackers coming. You're going to see safeties coming. You're going to see some zone fires. Their goal, Vince, is going to be this. We've got to force Notre Dame into mistakes. So Notre Dame's going to have to be disciplined. It's not just about being bigger and better and badder, which they are. It's about being disciplined. And that's something they weren't always that last week. So that's why I say, in a lot of ways, Vince, this is a really good test for Notre Dame based on what they struggled with last week in the run game. Because if you can't get your run game going this week, Vince.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. And I want to echo a point that you just made, too, about the fact that it's in Toledo's makeup to be stunting and slanting and twisting and doing all of those different things. Because, look, a lot of times when Notre Dame plays, a lesser opponent, a MAC team, if you will, they're going to do that just to Notre Dame. So it's outside of what they normally do.
And they're not good at it.
And they're not great at it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what you're saying, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, is that this is what they do, right? And that's what can hurt Notre Dame, because they're going to be good at it, because this is their makeup. This is what they do every single game, not just for a game where they're outmatched. So I think this is going to be a really good test, because you talk about the fact that there were some communication issues up front in game 1. And this is a chance to clean that up, because in order to do a good job against slants and all of those different things, you have to communicate. You have to operate as a group of 5 or 6, depending on if there's a tight end there, because if you don't, guys are going to come free. And when guys come free, bad things happen. So communication is going to be so important in this game.
So let's get specific to this matchup. Obviously, on paper, it looks very similar. I mean, it's a pretty evenly contested matchup to where it was last year. I don't think either one of these groups necessarily looked great in the opener. Obviously, Notre Dame didn't run the ball worth a darn against Florida State. Toledo gave up 142 yards and 147 yards in the opener to Norfolk State. That's not a lot of yards, but it's Norfolk State, right?
Yeah,
that's a decent number of yards, and I
think it's 3.5 yards a rush,
right.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it, to me, Vince, that's a sign that this is a vulnerable rush defense early on because of that lack of size. Now, Norfolk State just kind of kept pounding it. They're not a team that throws the football really all that effectively. Norfolk State only threw 19 passes in that game. They are a running team. Notre Dame is going to be a more effective pass team. I think the thing that's going to be more intriguing to me is what a week ago, I think Toledo was probably thinking, hey, we're going to line up, we're going to load the box, we're going to make Notre Dame beat us with the pass game. I don't think you can do that now.
Right.
Not after what you saw last week. So that part's going to be very interesting. Does that alter what Toledo would have done? But at the end of the day, you've got a Notre Dame offensive line that's got some size, a Notre Dame offensive line that better darn well have some attitude this game after what happened to them last week. You know what, Vince? That's the thing in this matchup I'm most intrigued by is does the Notre Dame offensive line come out and play with some attitude after getting embarrassed last week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do they even view it as being embarrassed? They should.
I hope so. My gosh, you can't. There's no way you can turn on that film as a football player or as a football coach and be like, yeah, we did good. Like, no.
Quentin Nelson led offensive line, and Alex Bars led offensive line, and Robert Hainsey led offensive line. Is going to look at that and just you're going to be pissed off the whole week of practice.
That's not good enough. That's not Notre Dame standard. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not the standard that was left for you as an offensive line, community, right? Because those guys talk to each other, and I almost guarantee you just named off some of those really important guys in the recent history of Notre Dame offensive line. Those guys are going to be in contact with the guys that are on the team right now. They're like, guys, it's not good enough. You know what I mean? That absolutely is going to happen,
right?
And I hope that it does. And I hope they kind of call them to the carpet, be like, guys, that's not Notre Dame. That's not what we do. And because we know that group is very close. Guys that have already graduated, and even guys that they didn't necessarily play with.
Man, no question about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And there are bridges between them. There's the Josh Lugg is a bridge between those eras. Certainly Josh Lugg and Jarrett Patterson are bridges to the previous era of the Eichenberg, the Kramers, the Hainseys, and the Bankses. But so what are they what's that mentality like?
Right.
Do they come out playing with a little chip on their shoulder? Honestly, Vince, I could deal with them messing up on some twists and stunts and just turning some guys loose if we see that.
Right.
Because you and I, look, you don't just magically fix all your problems in a week.
No.
You're still going to make some of those mistakes. You don't all of a sudden play one game and all of a sudden you're a well-oiled five-man machine. We're going to see that. And the comparison we used yesterday was the 2018 season. It really wasn't until game 3 that they started looking okay. It wasn't game 4 till they actually looked good. And it wasn't until game 5 they looked great. So we're going to see some mistakes on Saturday.
Sure.
And to a degree, I can live with some of that this early, considering you have 4 new starters up front. But what I can accept and what's going to give me long-term, concerns, again, I don't care to make sweeping conclusions after 1 or 2 games, but if they don't come out with some piss and vinegar in this game, that's going to concern me. That the mentality say, hey, we're going to come off hard. I'd rather you come off hard and then miss, and you can clean that up than to do the passive stuff we saw last week.
Yes, absolutely. Chip on the shoulder is huge right now.
And we're going to see it manifest itself in this matchup right here.
Yes. No
question. They don't have to run for 300 yards, but they better have some success. Give your running backs room to work. That's what I want. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to see like 220 yards because they ripped off a couple long runs. And then there's a lot of inefficiency in between. I want to see you pounding out yards, then hit the home runs. Obviously, I'm not saying don't hit home runs. I'm just saying don't only hit. Go down to 20. All right, we were trying to work on some stuff here. Well, what I'm saying is, I don't want to see that mixed in. Could you imagine that happening? I don't want to see that mixed in with a lot of -2s and 2s and 1s and 0s and stuff like that. I want to see some level of push in this game, and if they do that, Notre Dame should have success because this is not a super disruptive team. At least it wasn't last year.
Sure.
They weren't. I mean, they had 8 tackles for loss against Norfolk State. That's a good number, but not a great number against a team like against Florida State. It's about creating confusion up front that then allows some linebackers to run free and make plays.
Right.
And I think that's what they're going to look to do, and Notre Dame's going to obviously have to have an answer for that. So it's going to also be interesting to see Jonathan Jones. I thought Jonathan was a good football player at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He had 7 tackles in the opener. Had 19 tackles last year in 6 games as part of the starting line. He was, I watched him. He started against Ball State for sure. So it's going to be nice to see him. Like to see him have some success. So it's going to be a test. And when we say test, understand what we mean. It's a test in regards to the evolution of your football team. It's not a test that we're going to say if they have success, we're going to feel like, okay, they've arrived. This team drilled Toledo. They're ready to go.
Right.
That's not what we have a super chat from Tony Stangle here, Vince.
What's up,
feels like a get. He's absolutely right on this. I wanted to pull it up. This feels like a get-right game. What do we need to see from the O-line to feel confident moving forward? And he's absolutely right. This is a get-right game. And Vince, we kind of talked about it, but just summarize the two things that we really want to see from this line, and then we'll talk about who has the advantage.
Yeah, I need to see Notre Dame firing off the football in the run game. I need to see them playing with a chip on their shoulder, play with some aggression, play with some physicality. That's really what I need, and some better communication. To be honest with you, and again, it's game 2. We're going to see some mistakes. We are. It's just going to happen. So people need to expect that that's going to happen, just like we said going into game 1. But I need to see better communication. And execution, right? Communication and execution. There were a couple of times in Sunday night's game where you had two guys kind of double teaming, but then they left the inside open, and then that allowed the defensive end to get underneath both of them and get in there for a tackle for loss, right? It just needs to be better. So for me, it's firing off the football and it's playing with a chip. Those are the two things for me.
So advantage in this matchup, Vince, goes
it has to be Notre Dame. I mean, we would really be in bad shape as analysts if Notre Dame was not going to be the pick here against a Toledo MAC team. So I mean, it has to be advantage Notre Dame. But when we're grading out the film, I'm not looking at it as Notre Dame versus Toledo. It's Notre Dame versus Notre Dame.
Yes,
that's what I would be looking for as a coach, right?
Yeah.
Did they take that step from last week?
Right, because last week they're facing a team that had some. I mean, their smallest end was 255. Their other end was 272. They had 295 to 330 pounders inside. You're not facing that this week,
right?
And the ones that, and they, like I said, they have some guys in the 2 deep that have that kind of size, but they're not. They're at Toledo for a reason. With all due respect,
sure.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but at 315-pound nose tackles at Toledo for a reason.
Well, it's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in college football. There just is, and it's not disrespectful. It just is what it is.
Against these teams, I usually get more worried about the 230 or 225-pound end because he's usually a heck of a football player. He's just too small to get a scholarship to Notre Dame or Ohio State.
He's the athletic.
That scares me. Right?
He's the athletic, freaky kid who, again, just doesn't fit the mold.
The real twitchy guy that just doesn't have the frame to be that. Yeah, so. Definitely advantage Notre Dame when you talk about the Notre Dame offensive running the football against the Toledo defense and its rush defense. So let's go to point 2, Vince. Let's go to number 2 on this matchup, and that is the Notre Dame pass offense against the Toledo pass defense. Now, this is interesting because Toledo's defense numbers are going to look great based on the opener. They held the opponent to go 9 of 19. Right, pretty good day. Only gave up, 134 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick with a quarterback rating of 113.46. Problem is Norfolk State stinks when it comes to throwing the football.
You know what's funny is you and I are looking at box scores, I'm guessing from 2 different places because I have completely different numbers than you.
What do you have?
I have 8 of 18 for 125 yards.
Okay.
So it's just interesting. I don't.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from pro CFB stats.
Okay. Yeah, well, which I would trust more than where I'm at right now.
Well, who are you looking at?
ESPN.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Why are you giving them the clicks? What's wrong with you, man?
That's what came up on Google, man. So I clicked and went. But yeah, it's funny that they're.
I'm gonna pull up there, but it's like probably just one pass. I'm gonna pull up the Toledo team stats here.
It's one more completion and attempt that you have that was for what, 6 yards?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Here's a shocker. ESPN was wrong.
I told you.
The Toledo official stats have them as 9 of 19
Fair
for
enough.
134 yards.
I just thought that was funny. All right, sounds good.
I can't wait to
Now I know better.
Yes. Tommy Guns, I'm going to get to your super chat. I appreciate it. We're going to get to that after the show here, but the answer is no. So let's look at this matchup, Vince. Toledo obviously. Great numbers week 1, and Notre Dame, the numbers that, again, the numbers you see here, right?
Yeah, right.
Which way we going? Right that way? That way?
I got it right the first
there.
time.
Those numbers right there. don't look anything like what we saw in the opening weekend from either team.
Exactly.
Obviously, Toledo had great success against the Norfolk State offense that is a run heavy offense, and Notre Dame's pass game was phenomenal. I mean, Jack Cohn's numbers in the opener were ridiculous, and then when you consider the fact that he, had 2 balls dropped that probably could have got him close to 400 yards.
I think he would have been over 400. I think he would have been over 400.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredibly impressive performance. I mean, you talk about a quarterback rating of 194.14, averaged 10.5 yards per attempt, 14.1 yards per completion, 74.3 completion percentage, and they got sacked 4 times. I think that was the one drawback.
That's a bugaboo for sure.
But 366 yards, and it's not like he had they went to 3 overtimes. He had 0 passing yards in overtime.
That's true because they went conservative and just
right.
I mean, they threw a swing pass, but I think it was for no gain.
It was one of those bootleg under routes to Michael Mayer, and he got tackled at the line of scrimmage.
Right. Yeah.
So they didn't say they have any passing yards. So his numbers in regulation were.
They went super conservative in overtime.
Once they missed that field goal, I mean, again, I don't necessarily love that decision, but you know what? It is what it is. But but you look at what the numbers were beforehand. And really, if you look at the numbers before the Hail Mary, really threw 33 pass because he was what did I just say? 35 pass attempts, right? Mm-hmm. You take away the Hail Mary and then that overtime throw, he was at 33 pass attempts. That's 11.1 yards per attempt. That's better than what Alabama had last 2 years.
Right.
Just to put it into context of how good that performance was. So, and then you're going against a Toledo pass defense that last year did have. This is the area where they did have some problems last year. Yards per game were not good. Yards per attempt were better, but they had there were some games where they really struggled with the pass game, and that's something that I'm curious to see how he's been able to get that cleaned up. I think that to me is probably the area where you're going to be furthest behind when you talk about not being able to get your defensive install done because of COVID. Good start in the first game, but and then you look at it, and it needs some context. Those numbers, again, 47 yards per attempt. They played Bowling Green in the opener. Bowling Green went 8 of 30 in that game last year for 128 yards. The next 4 games, they gave up 69 completion percent, 64.1, 74.3. Northern Illinois went 19 of 39 for 48.7, so that was better. But those 19 completions resulted in 273 yards. They gave up 284, 244, 304 to Ball State, 273 to Northern Illinois. Gave up 3, 4, 2, and 2 touchdown passes in those next 2 games. So 11 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the next 4 games. That was obviously not a great performance. Had a better performance against Central Michigan, but Central Michigan was not a very good passing team last year. Central Michigan averaged 200 yards per game last year passing, had a quarterback rating as a team of 128.94. They were not a very good passing team last year. They were a running team under Jim McElwain. So, I mean, not a surprise. They averaged 218.2 rushing yards per game. So their pass defense is, to me, Vince, is the area where I think they're most vulnerable if we're talking about it from just a pure matchup. Forget what Notre Dame needs to work on, just looking at their team versus the other team. This is the area where I think Notre Dame has the biggest advantage.
Well, and from what we saw in game 1, and obviously you have the 2020 numbers up there for Notre Dame, which for good reason, there's only been 1 game for Notre Dame. But what we saw, it's a completely different philosophy for Notre Dame offensively this year. And if we were taking away, our pluses from Sunday night's game, it was the pass game. I mean, the only thing that derailed the pass game were the fact that Jack Cohn didn't have time in the pocket at times, right? I mean, that was
and 2 drops.
And 2 drops, exactly. And so, I'm sorry, but I don't anticipate Michael Mayer having the dropsies all season. I just don't. He's not that kind of a player. He's a very confident player. He's a kid who's going to fix that, right? And we've seen that in a microcosm of the Clemson game, right? He had a couple drops early, then he made the big play late. And I see that being the case with him. So I'm not necessarily worried about him. I just think that this pass game for Notre Dame is just going to take even another step potentially, spreading the ball around, getting the slots involved a little bit more, things of that nature. Plus, here's what I would like to see. And I realize that this is kind of a combo situation. I would like to see, there were 8 or 9 RPOs in the last game. I would like to see a pull and throw at some point, right?
Now,
and go ahead.
Just because we talked about, I just want to enter because yesterday we talked about we questioned whether or not there were those.
Right.
I went back and looked at my notes again, looked at my breakdown, went through it again last night. There was actually two big ones in the second half, including the first play of the second half. So that throw to Kevin Austin on the first play of the second half, that was an RPO. And it was a little different because in the first half, they were just doing those little look screen RPOs. They actually did some. The little throw out to Kevin Austin to the right where he caught it, made a guy miss, that was also an RPO. It looked to me like Tommy Rees went in there at halftime and said, hey, we got to make some adjustments because they were crowding the box and they needed to get the ball outside there, giving Notre Dame one-on-ones. And that's something that I liked, Vince, to your point. I want to see more pull and throws. I do.
Right.
I want to see a little bit more creative RPO game this week, but I liked the fact that at halftime it was obvious that Tommy Rees went in and said, hey, we need to make some adjustments. Some of those adjustments are we got to do these RPOs because if they're just going to load – because Florida State didn't blitz a whole lot. They really didn't. There's like the heated Notre Dame. No, they really didn't.
No, there was a lot of four-man fronts.
Yeah, that was
a lot of four-man fronts.
Disappointing.
Right.
But they were aggressive with their coverages. They were basically saying, Notre Dame, you're going to have to beat us throwing the ball downfield. And Jack Cohn was like, word, gotcha, I'll do that. So that was that to me. To your point, I just wanted to add some – I don't want to interrupt your point because your point is accurate, but I did want to just interject that because you and I value being accurate. And yesterday we said we couldn't remember them pulling and throwing any RPOs.
Sure.
So I just wanted to point out those two. Please get back to your point. Sorry for the interruption, but again, I wanted to make sure that we were accurate in what we were saying. But your point still stands, so please continue.
Right. If I'm looking at ways for this pass game to get better, to take another step, right, it starts for me with the RPO game, and I'd like to see that just a little bit more. And I realize the whole point of an RPO is to take what the defense is giving you, right? And if they're giving you the run game, then you hand it off. I mean, I totally get that. But I would like to see some pulls and throws because I still think Jack Cohn getting the ball out of his hands in a quick manner is an underestimated part of his game. And I don't think he really even had an opportunity to show it in the first game. And I think that his decision-making and him getting rid of the ball is something that I think he's really good at. And I think he can showcase that a little bit more in this game and moving forward. So I'd like to see that. And then, of course, I would like to see the offensive line provide him the opportunity to do the things that he needs to do in the pocket. I mean, there were too many times where he was the middle of the line was getting pushed back into him, and he wasn't able to step into his throws. Or he got rocked and he couldn't do what he needed to do. So that's what I would like to see from this offensive pass game.
I think that also would affect the part that we just talked about. I think that being able to pull on some of those times where, especially in this game, I think RPOs should even be more effective this game than they were last week because the thing is because Florida State was not low. Florida State had a lot of guys near the line.
Yes, they did.
But they weren't.
But they didn't
loading
go
the box the way that they did last year.
Yeah, they didn't necessarily go. They were kind of like setting the edge, if you will, just kind of staying out there. Yeah.
They thought they blitzed more in the first quarter and a half than they did in the last 2.5 quarters because they realized we're whooping Notre Dame's butt with 4.
Yeah.
So what that allowed them to do was then use their linebackers and safeties to just run to the ball. And so when Notre Dame was getting outside, they were still getting to Notre Dame and limiting the gains to a degree because they had guys coming downhill from depth. Whereas last year, once Notre Dame got past the line of scrimmage, there was nobody there, and they were able to rip off the long runs. And so I think that is where the RPOs kind of weren't quite as effective, like the quick game RPOs that you're talking about.
Yeah, and
that's why the best RPO they did was just a straight drop back, let her rip, which I thought set the tone for the second half and the aggressiveness that we saw in the third quarter. And I love the fact that we saw so much. I mean, they threw a 41-yard touchdown on 4th and 1. They threw a 37-yard touchdown on 3rd and 1. I loved that. You know, we saw 3rd and goal from the 6. We saw Jack Cohn hit. You know, we saw an empty free release from Notre Dame with Kyron Williams just swinging outside, catching the ball, making a guy miss.
Yeah,
we saw some aggressiveness in the pass game that we hadn't seen last year. We didn't see last year, and I liked that. I think that's going to benefit the run game. But this is a week where some of that RPO stuff should be more effective. If Toledo's not forced to bring 6 guys, we're going to be in trouble. There's no question. So.
And if they are bringing 6, just to add on to your point, if they are bringing 6, that's where it's the pull and the go, and you're going to get that wide open intermediate area where your RPOs are,
and you can get that stuff outside and get the guys.
Right.
You can get those guys.
You can get a 2-on-3 out there. You can get a 2-on-1. You can capitalize on the numbers, because if they're bringing 6, that means they're taking that 6th person away from some place on the defense, and you have to be able to take advantage of that.
Right, and so that's going to be the matchup. I mean, look, personnel-wise, Toledo, Florida State. Yes, they got that game.
Still, I mean, we've been talking about it for like 6 months. So
they do have some decent size in the secondary. Their nickelback is 6'1", 195. Nate Bowers is a strong safety. He's a good player, experienced player. He's 6'1", 195. He's a kid that actually Notre Dame looked at coming out of high school. He's a good football player, really athletic kid. Their free safety, Zachary Ford, is 6'3", 203. And then they've got a freshman cornerback starting, Quinyon Mitchell, who's 6'1", 197. I'll say this: if I don't see Tommy Rees, as I've been praising Tommy Rees all week,
sure,
I'm excited what he's going to do in the second game. I haven't looked this much forward to what the game plan is going to be in a long time. I'm excited about the game plan after what we saw Saturday. I hope that they don't just come out and say, hey, let's go 12, 13 personnel because we got to get the run game going.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think that gets you better for Purdue and Wisconsin. So it doesn't mean that you don't do things to try to get your run game established, but you've got to do it within the framework of what makes you a better football team. And going 12 personnel all day just to run the football against Toledo, I don't think makes you a better football team. You got to be able to run out 11 personnel. You've got to be able to run out of shotgun. You got to be able to do those things, right? Now, do you want to do some things maybe where you get under center and line up and do some things where you want to run the ball? Then that maybe sets up your true play action game. Sure, I'm good with that. Okay. But the point is, Vince, is that they need to still be aggressive throwing the football. They can't take a step back. If that's going to be who they are, they got to do that no matter who they're playing.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like this is, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, I feel like this is an identity game. This is where, look, we saw some really good things from this offense in the first game, right? And we saw some things they obviously need to work on. But in games like this is where you establish your identity. Right? This is where you're like, okay, this is who we are. This is what we do. We're going to be good at this. And it doesn't matter who we're playing. This is what we need to be. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to see them take a step back, like you said, and just be, we're going to go 13.
Brian Kelly has had a tendency to do in the past.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So to me, this is a huge identity situation for this offense and for Tommy Rees. If they go out and they have the same similar game plan that they had against Florida State, this is what we're going to see the rest of the year.
Just execute it better, right? Like exactly. I'm all good. If you want to force the run game early to get it going, I'm good with that. But don't do it in ways that's not who you are. Don't start going 12, 13 personnel all game.
Exactly.
Right? That to me doesn't make you a better football team.
Yep.
Maybe mix it in and things. So when you get back to the pass game, I want to see them be more aggressive. And they have a true freshman. So what I was going to say is they got a true freshman at corner. If I don't see, as excited as I am about this, if I don't see Tommy Rees going after him like early, like first few series, I'm going to be disappointed. And then the other corner, who's a good football player, Samuel Womack, he's a veteran player, solid football player, I should say. He's 5'10".
Right.
So you got two matchups that I like in this game that I want to see them take advantage of.
Yes, no question.
That's going to be the key. And that's going to tell me a little something about where the mindset is this football team. It's like, look, you got to be who you are. It doesn't mean you don't improve other parts of your game, but if this right now, Vince, right? So here we go. There we go. If this right here is the best part of where your offense is, you don't take a step away from that because you got to work on the other parts. You continue to thrive in that as you bring the other parts along, and then you use this part of your game to make that other part better. That's what I want to see. And that was to your point about, you started talking about RPOs during the pass game section, because those things are going to not only make your pass game effective, but those things are going to start protecting your run game.
Right.
And they forced Toledo or Florida State to defend them down the field.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see them do a little bit more, forcing them to defend the width of the field with the pass game. We didn't necessarily
do that. They didn't really do that. Yeah, you're right.
Some of the quick stuff to the backs I liked. The swing, we had a 9-yard swing screen to Chris Tyree. That was a design screen. You had a swing screen to the right. You had a tunnel screen to the left. Both of them were there. He took the correct pre-snap read. Now the tunnel screen opened up post-snap, but pre-snap Jack Cohn went where he was supposed to go. You had the swing to Kyron Williams where he got him in space and made a dude miss and scores a touchdown. So we saw it, but we need to see it more past the line of scrimmage now.
Sure.
The 10-yard outs, the 5-yard outs, the things like that. The quick hitches where you let Braden Lindsey catch it and square a dude up. They need to get Lawrence Keys more involved. I don't know if that's going to happen. I thought it was an absolute embarrassment that Lawrence Keys got 5 snaps. He's healthy. I know for a fact he's healthy. Got 5 snaps in this game. Ridiculous. Your slot's got 0 targets. Some of that was how Florida State was playing. They weren't going to let you beat them in the hash, really.
Sure.
But there needs to be some more of that, and I think that's an area where they can. That is one area where I think the pass defense can improve. And for Toledo, the question is going to be: can you put pressure on the quarterback, and Can you do it without bringing 6? I think that's going to be a question mark in this game. That's the only hope that they have is that they can get pressure on the quarterback, maybe have a strip sack or 2, force Jack Cohn to have to throw quick, force him to make misses because they're in his face. And that's where you're going to see a lot of those twists and stunts and corner fires and zone dogs and all that kind of stuff is trying to get him into a quick throw and then you're dropping right into it and you pick it off.
Right.
That's right. Those are the things that Vince Karras is going to design in an attempt to try to get done.
Try to confuse the quarterback, right?
I mean, that's beat Notre Dame man to man. You have to be able to force Notre Dame into mistakes.
Right.
And you have to scheme your way into that. And so outside of that, Vince, the advantage in this matchup clearly is with Notre Dame.
Oh, absolutely. It's not really even a debate, especially with what we saw. Like I would have taken Notre Dame if we were talking about this last year.
Right.
But
just those numbers right there to me, when you consider the competition, give Notre Dame the edge.
Absolutely. But then we take into account what they did last week. Right. And I feel like they should be, if Tommy Rees is everything I think he is, they're going to double down on what they were doing in week 1. Right. And I think that's even more of an advantage for Notre Dame. So, and again, there's things we're going to be looking for to get better, right? No question. But in this matchup, isn't
that kind of crazy that there's a lot of things you and I could point to in the past game that could have been better. And they completed 74.3% of their passes for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns, and went 9 of 12 on 3rd and 4th down, throwing the ball for like 178 yards and 3 touchdowns.
They were best on 3rd and 4th down in the past game. I felt like it's a different feeling when Notre Dame goes into 3rd and 4th down now than I've ever had in the past, ever.
And you know what, too, is by throwing a touchdown on 4th and 1, by throwing another touchdown on 3rd and 1, you've now put the rest of your opponents on notice. Yeah. You better not load the box up.
Please load the box up.
If you want to give us a one-on-one to Kevin Austin, we'll take it.
Right.
I don't care what down and distance it is. If you want to try to go one-on-one with Michael Mayer, I don't care if it's 4th and 2 centimeters.
Right.
We're not afraid to throw the ball because that's even more effective. A 41-yard touchdown pass is more effective than a 1-yard run to get you that moves the chains.
Right. Yep. Could not agree more.
So before we move on to the final breakdown, Vince, we did have a super chat from Jay. Jay says, when is the last time Notre Dame played 5 ranked opponents versus number 18 Wisconsin, number 7 Cincinnati, number 19 Virginia Tech, number 14 USC, number 24 North Carolina? Well, they played 7 ranked opponents in 2017. Teams that finished ranked in 2017. So that was this schedule still has some catching up to do to what that
and on top of that
schedule.
I'm not 100% convinced that every one of these teams that's listed is going to finish ranked. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's definitely possible, but you could make a case that may not be the case. So,
because when you look at the 2017 team, 7 ranked teams, 6 in the regular season. Right. So to answer your question, the last time that happened was 2017. And that was teams that finished ranked, not that were ranked at some point in time in the season.
And that's what matters to me.
Right.
That's what matters to me.
Yeah, because otherwise you say, what, in 2015, hey, they beat a number 15 Georgia Tech. They went 3-9.
Right. And then there was a year that they faced Michigan State early on. They weren't ranked. And then they ended up in
2013.
They ended up in like the top 10, right?
3. They went 13.
Yeah, top 5.
Their only loss was to Notre Dame.
Yeah. So those are the rankings.
So that was a huge win. That was a huge win. You give Brian Kelly credit for beating a top 5 team. I don't care if they weren't ranked at the time. Clearly, they were a top 5 team. It was a September game. So the preseason polls don't. It's like you're going to say that they beat a top 15 Georgia Tech team in 2015. They went 3-9, or the year before that when they played Michigan State on the road and Michigan State was top 10 and they finished 7-6
and then fell out. Yeah, exactly.
They weren't a good team. So it's about what they finished. But I do think at least 4 of those teams are going to finish in the top 25.
Okay. Okay.
But I don't think all 5 of them are. I think one of them will fall. I don't know who it's going to be yet, but one of them.
There's candidates. I mean, there's candidates to fall out. I mean, we'll see how the year goes and things.
Well,
we've only seen
Wisconsin
1 week.
only has one more game between now and the time they play Notre Dame, or 2. They have 2 more.
They should have 2 more, unless I
they have a bye.
Do they have a bye this early?
Yeah, so they play they play Eastern Michigan this weekend, then they have a bye, then they play Notre Dame.
Okay, well,
so they decided to put all their eggs in the let's beat Notre Dame basket with that schedule. I don't think that's going to work out well for them, in my opinion.
Right. That's
and they need extra games. I mean, the way that they played, they need more than the Eastern Michigan game on offense to get that thing going. But that's a different conversation for a different day.
Yes, it is.
So, Vince, let's move on to the final part of this breakdown, and that is just kind of taking these 2 things and put them in together, and you come up with your scoring offense. Mm-hmm. And for all of Notre Dame's issues last year, they were a pretty decent scoring offense team. But when you look at these numbers over here, right, they're very comparable. Overall numbers are very comparable. Notre Dame finished 30th in scoring offense, Toledo 36th in scoring defense. Notre Dame finished 26th in yards per game, 34th in yards per play. Toledo was 36th and 34th on defense. Neither of them were worth a darn in the red zone, and they were both great on third down. I mean, it's almost like they were almost identical teams last year as far as this particular matchup. Now, again, Notre Dame did that against a schedule that had Clemson twice, had Alabama, had Boston College, and North Carolina and teams like that, right? And Toledo's was a MAC team, but Toledo also has MAC players.
Right, exactly.
Right? So it's not like they were a Ohio State playing against a bunch of MAC teams. So
right.
And then when you also factor in how bad they were in all these areas the year before. I mean, their numbers the year before were really bad. I mean, like I said, they finished they finished 36 in scoring defense last season. In 2019, they finished 101st.
Whew.
Right, gave up 32.2 points per game. They finished 36 last year in total defense. In 2000 and in 2019 they finished 123rd. They gave up 470. It's 100. It's close, 130.
Okay.
They finished 123rd the year before in total defense. In yards per game, yards per play, they finished 34th last year. They finished 120th the year before. So I just want to point this out because what Vince Karras did in one season with no offseason is a tremendous job. And it may not manifest itself on Saturday against Notre Dame, but the guy's done a great job, and I feel like we need to give credit where credit is due, because Vince, that is a huge turnaround.
Absolutely.
That's a bigger turnaround. I mean, that's as big of a turnaround as what Mike Elko did in 2017, replacing Brian Van Gorder.
Right.
And he had Jerry Tillery and Drew Tranquill and, all these NFL players to work with. I think that I just want to give credit to, I respect good coaches. And
sure.
Jason Candle's a good coach, and he made a great hire when he went, because Vince Karras was living a good life, at Mount Union, winning championships all the time, making good money there. He had a good life, can get any recruit he wanted in the state of Ohio. He was living a good life. He also took a leap, and it certainly rewarded itself in year one. No question about it. So Ben, of course, he learned from a legend his whole life, watching his dad coach all those years.
Doesn't hurt.
So, but overall, the statistics are similar. So if we're just looking at it on paper on this matchup, Vince, then yeah, it's a very close matchup.
It is.
But again, This is last year's numbers. I think Toledo's going to be even better this year on defense. I do. But I think Notre Dame's going to be even better on offense. And I think that's the part of this that's going to be interesting is, can Toledo keep Notre Dame's points down enough to make this a competitive second half game? That's going to be the interesting thing. And that's not really something Toledo has done in past years. What we don't know about Vince Karras is how's he going to do against a Power 5 team. They haven't had a great level of success in these matchups in the past. They lost by 2 touchdowns to Kentucky in 2019. They lost to Miami by 25 in 2018, lost to Fresno State by 22 that year as well. They haven't been super competitive under Jason Candle against those Power 5 teams. Lost to Miami 52-30 in 2017. Lost to App State in a bowl game 34-0. So they haven't really been competitive in these types of matchups. This is his first chance, in my opinion, to kind of have that to kind of have that, okay, hey, we are a different program, and it's showing now against Power 5 teams. That's going to make this this an interesting matchup. But I think in the end of the day, Notre Dame's got the advantage. Statistically, it's not a huge advantage, though, Vince. It really isn't. But I think when you look at the personnel and you talk about who Notre Dame had to play compared to who Toledo had to play, there's a pretty difference.
Well, and yeah, I mean, on paper, it's even, but I am very interested to see what Notre Dame does from a points scoring standpoint. Putting up 41, against Florida State, I think was good, and I feel like they left 2 touchdowns out there at least. And so, if Notre Dame is a little bit more, fundamentally strong in some of their areas, if they're catching balls they should catch, if they are completing drives that they should complete, I'm interested to see what this looks like, against Toledo, and the other thing is, am I worried about Notre Dame losing this game? No, especially from an offensive standpoint. I am not worried at all. What I want to see is Notre Dame take care of business and put a team like this away offensively. You know what I mean? Put those points on the board. You get an 18-point lead. It's not time to take your foot off the gas. It's time to continue to, run your offense and do your thing. You could sprinkle in a couple of twos. You can do some things offensively. That's fine. But I think you still need to run your offense, and establish the run game. That's fine. But know who you are. Stay with your identity. I think Notre Dame will do that. I just want to see, kind of what this point scoring offense can be moving forward. So, yeah, of course it's advantage Notre Dame, but things that we're definitely going to be keeping our eye on.
For me, when I look at this matchup, Vince, I see a Notre Dame offense that number one was 2 for 2 on touchdowns. They got in the red zone twice, got touchdowns both times. That's a positive, right? That's something they didn't do last year. We also saw a team that took a step back on third down. They went 6 of 17 on third down, right? That's 35.3%. That's a big drop off from last year. Again, one game. There were some drops on third down that caused that. There were some O-line issues on third downs that caused that. One third down failed because Jarrett Patterson snapped the ball too soon and too high for Jack Cohn, right? I mean, so there was a lot of sloppy mistakes that are game one mistakes. They're going to have to clean that up. The thing that, to me, that when I look at this game, for all the talk about how Notre Dame barely survived Florida State, Notre Dame was up 38-20 at one point in time, and that included the fact that their first 4 drives got into Florida State territory and they got 1 touchdown.
Yeah. Right.
Those are the things I want to see this game. Those are the areas where, yes, the numbers were good, but if you're a coach and you're saying, yeah, the numbers were good, but can we be better? And in this instance, they can be. You've got to finish off those drives. You've got to move the ball, get the ball into Toledo territory, and then get points. When you cross mid, I mean, that's how any offense should have that. Once we cross midfield, we're getting points. Right,
absolutely.
We're flat out getting points.
Absolutely.
Notre Dame missed those opportunities on Toledo. That's an area where I do think we can see improvement. Even though a good 41 points is great and 38 in regulation against a what I think is going to end up being a pretty decent Florida State team, a team that's going to go to a bowl game, an improved team. I think Notre Dame made them look a little better than they are.
I agree with that.
But Florida State battled their butts off in that game.
They did. Look, they battled. They absolutely wanted it more than Notre Dame.
They weren't afraid of Notre Dame. And that says a lot about what he's brought this program. And they also didn't think that, hey, we're Florida State. We deserve, we're going to go out there and you're going to fear it. No, they said we got to earn their respect. And they went out and earned it.
Absolutely.
They're just not as good as Notre Dame is right now. But
the score of what it was at the end of regulation, right? It's a tie game. Those were self-inflicted wounds by Notre Dame. They were self-inflicted wounds. And, there's that high school documentary on Netflix that I watched, and the guy gets up before every game and he says, who can beat the Wildcats? And they're like, the Wildcats. Like, that's what it was for Notre Dame. Who could beat Notre Dame that night? Notre Dame is the answer to that question. It wasn't Florida State. Now, I'm not taking anything away from what Florida State did because they wanted it more. They played hard. Hard. But that game should not have been where it was because of the self-inflicted wounds by Notre Dame.
That's also where Notre Dame can say, okay, game 2, be better.
Right.
And I think that's the encouraging thing for me, Vince. As I look at it, I see 41 points. I see four over 430 total yards. I see decent yards per play. 6.2 is a decent. It's not great. It's not terrible. I mean, 6.2 last year would have ranked you 34th in the country. So it's good. But when you consider that 6.2 ranking came with a lot of missed opportunities and a lot of negatives, tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, I believe is what they said. I think that's I look and say, hey, look, I'm feeling good about where they're headed, right? If they can clean this stuff up. But this is where you got to start cleaning it up, right? You've got game 2, you're at home, you got to clean that stuff up. So, be better on third down. When you cross midfield, have that mentality of, hey, here we go. We got to be hungry. We can sniff. It's like you sniff the end zone at that point in time. You got to really turn that look, oh, I want to get in there now. And I don't think they had that enough on Saturday. Now, once they got in the red zone, you could tell they really wanted it, and they ran one in, powered one in, had another one was a little sloppier, but they got it done. So that's areas where I think they can improve. If we see them just relying – it was great. It was great that they were able to make the big plays for touchdowns. That was great. But they need to show that they can put a nice long drive together too. That's what we didn't really see a lot of from Notre Dame. So good for the big plays. Now let's get a little bit more efficiency going with it. Because when your cornerback average is over 10.5 yards per attempt and you only average 6.2 yards per play as a team, which is where Notre Dame was this past week. I'm going to actually look it up here real quick. It was 6.16, so 6.2. I was correct. That means you were really inefficient in other areas. And that's what we saw from Notre Dame against Toledo. So I think that's an area where, for me, I look at this and I say, if they can clean that stuff up, be a little bit more efficient in the run game. The run game doesn't have to look like it did last year. It just has to be something teams have to respect. It doesn't have to be 2017, 2020. Just be efficient, make teams respect it. And then that's going to continue to allow your pass game to thrive, which then is in turn going to make your run game even more effective because teams can't play the box. So clean that stuff up. You cross midfield, get points. Mm-hmm. You get into the red zone, get 6. Those are the things that we need to see, and I think that's why that's where Notre Dame needs to improve. Again, advantage Notre Dame for all the reasons you mentioned, but those are the things that I want to see to say, hey, I'm going to evaluate this part of the game with a good grade. I didn't necessarily give them a great grade on scoring offense against Florida State because, yes, they ended up with 41 points, but they missed so many opportunities. We can talk about the defense all we want. The defense should have done this and should have done that. If the offense capitalizes on its early opportunity, remember the defense gave them the ball at midfield or inside the 50-yard line twice in the first quarter, right? And they got 0 points out of those 2 drives. Okay, that it should have been 21-0 before Florida State had a chance to breathe, or at least 21-7 had a chance to breathe. Absolutely. That's on the offense. Mm-hmm. And so now the offense picked the defense up when the defense started struggling, and the defense made some stops late, gave the offense a chance to win it. Love all that, right? And that includes holding Florida State to a field goal in the end of regulation, not giving up a touchdown to lose. It means getting that stop in overtime. Those are all good. But so there's certainly areas where the offense can improve and should improve. And I want to see that faster start. That's the thing for me. Start faster.
When we talked about that as one of our keys to the game in the first game, right?
And they didn't do it.
They did not do it.
Exactly. The fact that they missed on all those opportunities to get points allowed Florida State. And again, what would Florida State's team have done if Notre Dame takes their first 3 drives and puts points on the board?
Right. It's a completely different game plan at that point.
Yeah.
It has to be because now you're playing catch up, right? And now you're asking Jordan Travis to be a passer. And that's what Notre Dame would have wanted.
Right. So that's the interesting part of that matchup, Vince. So that is going to do it for this part of the breakdown of Toledo. Tomorrow we will look at the Notre Dame defense against Toledo offense. That's going to be a very intriguing matchup. This is going to be one of the 4 or 5 best running backs, Bryant Koback, that Notre Dame will face this season. They have a Division II transfer on the offensive line that Ryan Roberts, our NFL draft analyst who writes for Rise and Draft, is going to actually – I'm sorry, that's going to be tonight. That's going to be tonight. We're going to have that tonight. Vince, was it 8 o'clock is what we said?
We can go earlier if you want to.
Okay.
But
you and I will chat afterwards. Yeah. But it'll be at least 7 o'clock.
Yes.
7 or 8 o'clock. We'll look at that. We'll have that. That'll be tonight. And then tomorrow, because
we're all compressed, right?
The Sunday thing and all that, just traveling on Monday is just I'm still thinking it's Tuesday. Totally jacked me up. We'll have our game predictions tomorrow.
Right.
And a couple of things we may have for y'all this weekend too. So be ready for a lot more shows. Friday will be a mailbag. Vince and I will be there for that. So be prepared for that tonight. But see, that's why you need to subscribe and make sure you need to hit the notification bell because that's how you know. So we're not done with this show yet, but that's how you know that when the show is going to be. We'll try to give you at least an hour heads up for when the show is going to be tonight. So make sure you're ready for that. And Vince won't be in lockup for the show, and Vince won't have the same deadline. He's got to get back to class to get with those kiddos. So it won't be a super long show, but we'll have a little bit more freedom to kind of engage with you a little bit tonight. So that's it. So Vince, before you move on, do you have a couple of these questions that I want to get? I want to try and see if I can find a couple of these questions that
I got kicked out a couple times
before we leave. Yeah,
so.
I got booted down a little bit as well. I just want to throw this up there because it's so appropriate.
Yeah, totally dropped the ball on that one. That's on me, guys. Yep. I'm gonna have to. I have to be better. I got to be better. That's on me.
And then Michael Campbell does say if you're going to use the discount code Notre Dame to order Peacock TV streaming service for $2 a month, and if you're going to boycott and not do it, then you don't need to worry about that. But if you are going to do it, then there you go. I will not be getting Peacock because I'll be at the game, so I don't need Peacock, and I'll have ways of getting the game afterwards. So I will not be paying for that. All right, let's see if there's any more questions here. A lot of concealed carry conversation. We won't get into that again today. Let's see here. Some trolls showing up today. That's always fun. So Jay says, I see Prince Colley's list as number 2 on the depth chart last week. Time to turn that kid loose and don't look back. I think that's also partly because Shane Simon was injured on Saturday.
Right. So, he had a shoulder. Yes. And we're going to get probably more details on that tomorrow during Brian Kelly's presser, I would imagine. But yeah.
And I have heard that I've heard the reports. I believe it's Tom Loy, I think is what people told me that Blake Fisher can be out 6 to 8 weeks. I have tried to get people at Notre Dame to confirm that. And no one has confirmed it. So that's why we haven't reported on it, because I'm not saying I doubt Tom. I'm not disrespecting Tom. It's just that journalistically, I can't report on something until I get confirmation from somebody on Blake's side or Notre Dame's side. So that's why we haven't talked about it. But he was not in the 2 deep today, which at least tells you he's definitely going to be out this week. So they won't have Blake Fisher this week. Michael Carmody is obviously going to be a part of that. Is going to be there. We should have probably talked about that a little bit earlier during the run game thing. But honestly, it shouldn't matter.
Not in this game.
No, not in this game. It'll be a bigger issue next week, and then obviously when you get into Wisconsin. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And D-Rock agrees with the events.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yep. That's what I want to see, because I think that's just an unexplored part of this offense at this point. We're only 1 game in, but that's an unexplored area that this offense, I think, could be really, really good at.
Yeah. Zachary Ryan asked, do we have any idea how long Patel is unavailable? I have no idea. It wouldn't shock me if it's the same thing that Kevin Austin was in 2019 and Kelly. But see, the thing that ticks me off about this, Vince, is by not addressing the issue, you just allow rumors to run rampant all season. And exactly right. Say he's out, and then it's not a story anymore. We know he's not there anymore. We don't talk about him anymore. We're not going to ask, hey, how's Jordan Patel doing 8 weeks from now, right? It's just say it. But his refusal to do that is just utter nonsense, and it ends up not being good for the kid. I don't know why he does it. It's because then he got asked Kevin Austin questions constantly throughout the 2019 season, and he got annoyed. Wait, how about he's suspended? We know he's suspended, but we can't say it till you say it. How about you tell us that he's suspended, and we can write our stories and move on.
Exactly.
But he refuses to do that. John Rich, Vince, I want to get your thoughts on this. I'd like to see Jack Cohn take a solid 7-step drop, look off Braden Lindsey, then dare Cohn to try to overthrow Lindsey on a post route. Lindsey will likely catch up.
Here's the problem with that. Number one, you're already in shotgun. So you take 7 steps, you're 20 yards behind the.
But even let's say he goes under center, right? Let's say it's play action, right? So that is because they don't do 7-step drops anymore. But when you run play action, you ascend. That's your way of getting
essentially what you're doing. Yes, you're right. So if they did that, the problem is Lindsey is so fast and they did all that action in the backfield. There's no way he's going to overthrow Lindsey. He may not catch up to Lindsey. So. That would be my issue with it, John. I love the idea, I really do. I mean, you're opening up the pass game and you're letting Lindsey run underneath it. But the problem is Lindsey's too fast for that, and Jack Cohn can't throw it 75 yards.
Right. I mean, look, I've said I'll say this again. I think Ian Book has a stronger arm than Jack Cohn. I do believe that, Vince. I think you agree with me on that.
Yes, I do.
And when they played Navy a couple of years ago, Ian Book dropped back. He was in the shotgun. He did a quick 3-step drop and gathered twice and then launched it as far as he could throw, and he hit Braden Lindsey in stride. The ball went about 55 yards downfield. If you were to run a play action like that, you'd have to throw the ball 65, 70 yards.
That's a haul. I mean, that's a haul.
That's how fast Braden Lindsey is. So,
right.
no, I'm doing exactly what we saw them do in the second half. I'm dropping back, I'm hitting my depth, and I'm letting it launch then.
Yep.
and that's what that's what Kaiser did to Will Fuller. And I mean, when he hit that bomb against Stanford, he didn't play action. He hit his drop and launched it.
Exactly.
And then just let him. So I agree with the whole let him run underneath it, but I think you do it out of your normal shotgun drop. I'm not running a play action and letting Lindsey go. No.
It's too long. It's just going to take too long, man.
He's too fast.
Lindsey won't be catching up. The ball won't be catching up. That's going to be the problem.
Yep. Here's another one you're going to like before you go, Vince. From Chad Williams, also agreed, not just a faux play action. Stick the ball in the belly and throw, a true RPO where the linebacker and inside the box safety freeze and hit the tight end behind them and wide receivers on slants. I like those too, but I'm a big fan of the RPOs that are I like the screen RPOs. I like the bubble RPOs. I like the hitch and out RPOs as well. I don't love always throwing RPOs over the middle because there's going to be times that you don't see that guy coming from the backside.
Right. That's the problem.
And because he's not your read.
Sure.
And so you've got to have a nice mix. Alabama will throw some of that stuff, but a lot of their stuff works outside. It's, it's the slant. They call them glances, but it's an outside break. It's to an outside guy. They'll hit some stuff over the middle too, but I think you got to mix it up. Those things are important, but I also want to see some of the outbreaking stuff too, where he's just catching and throwing, because those are RPOs as well. Like he didn't do a ride on the throw to Kevin Austin.
Right.
He saw the one-on-one, and he just pulled it and threw it.
He took it. Yeah, he took it.
And I like those as well.
All right, Brian, I got to roll, but hopefully everybody can join us tonight.
You got to see one thing before you go, Vince. I had to
more.
boot like 4 people from the show today. So D-Rock says to Tommy Guns, O-line needs to effectively block like Brian does with these trolls.
That's great. I did see some of the trolling, and you got to it just before I did, so that was well done on your part. So I'm always playing catch up with you. It's how we roll. Yep. All right, everybody.
Good, man.
I will see everybody tonight.
All right, so let's get back to some more of these questions here that you all have, and then we're just going to try to get to a few of them that I'm going to address with the offense. Paul Argentieri says, would Notre Dame have been better off having Gibbons on the offensive line? How well did he play? I thought he played well, but he had some of the same issues he's had at Notre Dame, where it's just a consistency thing. And again, I don't think the issue is the talent on the offensive line. It's the preparation. And I don't think that would have changed had Dylan Gibbons been here. The issue isn't the players, in my opinion. It's the players' execution, but the execution comes from preparation. The preparation comes from the coaching. This isn't players out there coaching themselves all summer and all fall camp. They've got to be prepared first and foremost. I'm just trying to find a few more questions before we get here. All right. D-Rock says, if Notre Dame struggles this week and the game is on Peacock only, watch out for the post-game feedback. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Michael Johnson says, I think this is the game that the defense should be looking at who fits and who can be on the field at the same time. The 3-3-5 worked with the right personnel. I think the 3-3-5 works, however, as a change-up. This team is still best when there's 4 defensive linemen on the field. And when Isaiah Foskey is one of those 4 linemen with him on the edge or coming, I think that's where this team is best. So I like the 3-3-5 stuff, the 3-4 stuff as a change-up. It can't be the base defense. And I think what happened when they made that shift in the second half after going up 38-20 was they went to it almost exclusively, and they weren't as aggressive as they were before. I think those were more of the issues. David Hess says, go Irish. I'll be there for this one. Hopefully we don't let these guys hang around. Yes. I want this game to kind of be over quickly. Corey D says, I'd like for Lawrence Keys to be more involved in the offense, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think it was a mistake not to play him more. I think it was a mistake to have 4 receivers to play the predominant number of snaps on a very hot, humid night when 2 of those receivers are guys with injury histories. I don't think that was a smart move. Yes, they were making plays, but you've got to find more ways to give those guys time. I just don't think that they handle, and that's a Dell Alexander problem. Simple as that. What I was told today as to why Lawrence Keys didn't play was just one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. So Hopefully that changes this weekend, but unfortunately, I don't think it will. You know how this coaching staff is. Once they decided, this is the rotation, and that's going to be the rotation until guys just absolutely stink. And again, it's not that the guys that didn't play well. They played very well. You can't take two guys who've been injury prone their whole careers and say we're going to play you 85, 90% of snaps like we have in the past. They have to do a better job of getting other weapons with different skill sets in the game and making your team a little bit more difficult to prepare for and to challenge. Curtis still has, so do we know if any of the players who were unavailable are available Saturday? I would imagine Logan Diggs will be. I don't know the answer on Jordan Patejo and Sebo Flemister. I would imagine Sebo will be available. I'm going to guess that his thing was just sort of like a one-game thing, but that's just a guess. That's not. I don't have any info on that, but because of how his situation was handled, I wouldn't imagine if it was just like a one-game thing. Michael Johnson, can we get a wheel route with Keys and Lindsey, please? I don't know if wheel routes were necessarily needed on Saturday or going to be effective on Saturday. They ran one on the first play of the game. They ran a couple of them. The problem is a wheel route takes time to develop, and they weren't getting any time to throw. I mean, they just the downfield throws that worked were ones where Cone was just kind of getting rid of it pretty quickly. So wheel routes take time. You got to let the first level clear, then you got to get your out cut, then you got to go up. I just don't know if the way the pass pro was on Sunday would have necessarily been effective. Brendan McCarthy says, this is the game where we exude our will on offense, stretch the field, get Lindsey involved on stretch plays and post routes. I agree with that. Chad Williams says some jet sweeps would be nice. The motion that Notre Dame incorporates is lazy. They could so much more off of jet sweeps and fakes off them. They did it on Saturday. I think that there are some things that they maybe could do a little bit differently, but they did. There are some jets. Again, this is game one. They're trying to get some things figured out, and I'm curious. We saw some two-back personnel, not a ton. I'm curious, how did some of the guys being out impact what you were going to do with moving the backs outside too? That's something I'm curious to see. If Diggs is back, do we see more two running back personnel in this game? Curtis Hughes says, I'm worried the D is thinking too much on what their assignment is, and that's keeping them from playing fast and executing. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think the issue was them playing fast. I think they played very fast. I think the issue was when they got there, they didn't make plays on the ball. I mean, the 89-yard touchdown run should have been like a 4-yard gain, right? You had Riley Mills making a big mistake. You had DJ Brown right in the hole with a chance to make a play, and he didn't make it. It should have been like a 5-yard gain. So I don't think the issues were that. I know Brian Kelly said that. I think that's just Brian Kelly talking out of his you-know-what, which he has a tendency to do. Every time something doesn't go right, he'll say something that you're like, I watched the film. That's not what happened. That's just what he does. He's done that for 12 years. It's just who he is. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. They weren't thinking too much. They were reacting hard. They just missed assignments. They made mistakes, and it's going to happen in week one, and you've got to clean that stuff up. But it wasn't that they were thinking too much. Richard Robinson says, it's a shame about Big Blake. Going to miss him. If Cone has time, I think he will have a great season. Based on talent alone, who would your starting wide receivers be moving forward? I don't think it's ever on talent alone, Richard. I think it's always got to be about talent plus, how effective can you be executing your assignments? And sometimes that's about talent. Sometimes it's a combination of talent and experience. And I have no problem who the starters are. I think the starters should be who they are. It should be Avery Davis on the slot. It should be Braden Lindsey outside. It should be Kevin Austin backside. That's who it should be. I just feel like they need to have a better rotation, not just play Joe Wilkins, but you need to play Lawrence Keys at least 20 more snaps a game. You need to at slot and outside. You need to get Lorenzo Styles more than just one play. And hopefully this is the week against a team like Toledo that they decide to do that. And I also want to say, hey, no need to comment about how Richard, if he wants to type in all caps or needs to type in all caps, and that's what he can do. All right. So hopefully we can move on from that. Find some more questions here. Michael Johnson says Brian or Vince, can Pryor take Simon's spot? I'd consider it, but I don't know if you want him playing inside all the time, number one, and he still is going to have the same issues at will that he had at Rover, and that is he's just not very good in pass coverage. I think Shane Simon Isaiah Pryor needs to be a rotational player that you use to do things he's good at. That's what I would do. Chris Rivers says he should have got open. Also, Wilkins and Austin were the mismatch. I don't know who you're referring to should have got open. I missed that comment, so I apologize, Chris. Said also Wilkins and Austin were the mismatch. They look like freaks out there. I'm going to disagree on Joe Wilkins. I thought Joe made a great play on that touchdown, but he was covered, and he was covered all night. He wasn't getting any kind of separation. He was not really getting open much. But when he got his chance to make a play, he made a great play. So that was a really impressive play, and a big play too. It came at a very big moment, and that was very key, obviously. Matthew, let's see. Johnny Maloney says, I lost some questions here. He says, how do you think Houston Griffith played? I thought other than that one pass play, I thought he played pretty well. I think that he made some mistakes at times like everybody else did, but I thought he played a very good game outside of that one play. And then that just shows, like, when you're not an elite athlete, and he's not an elite athlete, you cannot afford to have those technical mistakes. And he made a technical mistake, and that technical mistake cost him to get beat. And he's going to have to clean that up. When he flat foots in coverage like that, he has a tendency to get beat because he can't open and run with those guys. He needs to be more sound. And he was, for most of the game, he was. I thought he played very well. He played pretty well other than that one play, I should say. So I think that's an area where he's going to have to he's going to have to be more effective in that regard. Well, a lot of comments here, not a lot of questions. Let me get down these last couple before I David Pollard says IB has the best analysis anywhere. We will see how much Notre Dame has improved once they face Wisconsin. Go Irish. I appreciate that, David, very, very much. Appreciate the kind of words. I think these next 2 weeks are important, though. I do think we need to noticeably see the improvement the next 2 weeks. I don't think we should just dismiss improvement the next two games. I think Purdue is a team that I also think is going to be better than what their record was last year. I think Purdue is better than maybe what some people think they're going to be. They had a nice win over Oregon State at home. Wasn't the prettiest performance. They had a lot of issues like Notre Dame had, some sloppiness, some missed opportunities. They got the win. They'll probably be undefeated by the time they play Notre Dame. I'm looking to see what their schedule is like next. So they got the win over Oregon State. They play UConn this week, and then they play Notre Dame. So they'll probably be 2-0. So I think we need to see things before we get to Wisconsin. But, yes, that's going to be the next big test, in my opinion, is going to be that Wisconsin game. And Irish for Life says that, too. We need to see improvements this Saturday, or we may have some serious issues. Perfection, no improvement. Yes, absolutely right. You nailed it. You nailed it. Kevin Thomas says, what's a good method for rewatching the Florida State Notre Dame game? There's a condensed version on YouTube, but I'm missing a lot of the no-gain plays that I wanted to watch to see what was going on. There's full game versions on there, too. What I always do is I type in Notre Dame Florida State 2021, and then when it sends me the options, I put, I go to the filters, I put last week, and then I put over 20. And it'll start filtering out some of those other ones and makes it easier to find that. Tommy, so we got booted out of what your super chat was, so I did not get to see it or not to go back to it. If you could send it back to me, I would appreciate that. If you could add the question again so I can look at it again. Corey D says, do you expect to see more of Lawrence Keys this weekend, or are we in for another frustrating year in terms of receiver rotation? Based on what I was told today, I think we're going to be in for another year of frustration receiver rotation. Frustrating receiver rotation. I hope I'm wrong on that, but I think we will. Paul Rose says, really hoping that we get a chance to see Audric Estime this weekend. Yeah, I would like to see a nice – and that's partly why I want to see them come out and just be aggressive, throw the ball, take your chances, run at them, but just jump all over Toledo early so that we can see those guys get some action as the game goes on. That would be – I would love to see that because I want to see Estime and Diggs start getting some carries and start getting some attempts to go play. There's no need to redshirt those kids. They're not 5-year players. Running backs are rarely 5-year players. They're not 5-year players. So there's no need to, save them 4 games or whatever. That would be a waste, in my opinion. Give them a chance to play this week and then start working them into the rotation more often than not. There's going to be some games you're not going to do that, but they need to get their chances to play. Corey D asks again, I want to see more of Keys, Watson, Styles. Any chance of that this weekend? I hope so, because if we see them, it means Notre Dame's winning in big fashion. Some people are never happy. Colin Wyman says, love Jack's arm and confidence, but man, I miss the mobility at the quarterback position. I don't. Give me a guy that completes 75% of his passes for 366 yards but can't run all day. Look at Alabama, right? Coming into the playoff, Mac Jones had -9 yards rushing. I don't care if a quarterback can run or not. Get the flipping ball out to your playmakers. I want to see Braden Lindsey running, not the quarterback. I want to see Kevin Austin running, Avery Davis, Lawrence Keys, Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, not the quarterback. There were so many missed opportunities last year for Ian Book to get the ball to his playmakers because he was running around, and it hurt the offense. Give me a Jack Cohn over that any day of the week, and that's why we saw what we saw on Saturday. David Knight says, Lindsey has speed but zero shake and bake. Brown and Ismail had both. I don't think he needs the shake and bake, but I'm going to somewhat disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think if you go look at the touchdown he had against New Mexico in 2019, I think he showed, he showed a little bit. Look, sometimes shake and bake is about using your speed, right? And I think he did that on the touchdown on the reverse against USC. So I wouldn't call him he's not Reggie Bush by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't call him a guy that has zero shake and bake because we've seen him do it. We've seen him do it for touchdowns in college. Collins follows up with, don't get me wrong, I think Jack brings a whole new dynamic. Pushing the ball down the field is a need with this receiving core, but when the play breaks down, I miss the option to take off and run. Okay, so you wish they had Trevor Lawrence. I mean, most guys aren't that, right? If you're going to give me one or the other, give me what Jack Cohn brings over a guy that's unwilling to throw the ball but will take off running all the time, okay? You're saying basically, Jack Cohn's not a top 5 NFL draft pick, so I missed that. I don't care. You got enough. You got all the playmakers they got. I don't want him running. To me, if I'm the opposition, I want a quarterback running with the playmakers Notre Dame has. That's a win for you. Robert says, I think Rocco Spindler would play more physical. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. I think I would expect him to play this weekend. Adam Blair, who do you think is the most underrated player on the roster that most people aren't talking enough about? It's a good question. I don't know if I have one. Adam, this is a really good one. I have to think of. I mean, I think Justin Adamiola is one of those guys. I think Drew White is talked about, but not given enough credit for how good he's been. And I thought he played very well on Sunday night. I think at receiver, I don't think that Lawrence Keys is a guy that gets enough respect from the coaching staff and the fans. Well, I think fans do, but I think he's underrated by the staff. I don't know what it is they don't like about him. All I know is every time the kid's been given a chance to make a play, he makes plays. I don't get it. John Rich says, after looking at kickoff return film and seeing no red shirts on the screen, do you think that Notre Dame will actually try to let Chris Tyree flash his speed and elusiveness against Toledo? I doubt it, but I hope so. I hope so, John. I just don't. I don't get that. It blows my mind. I don't understand that one bit. I'm going to try to pronounce this one. It says, Brian, thoughts on the offensive line possibly playing better on run plays moving forward now that they can shift back to traditional snap counts without the hustle environment. I reject that wholeheartedly. I can't believe Brian Kelly's still on this thing. I can't believe he's making excuses for not being able to run the ball because they had to go silent count. Like, this is the same nonsense he said against Georgia in 2019. You're 12 years at Notre Dame. You haven't figured out how to snap the ball in the shotgun in a loud environment like every other good team in the country. I mean, all Oklahoma does is snap the ball in shotgun. You're telling me Oklahoma doesn't run the ball well on the road? They do. So this is the stuff I was saying earlier. Like, Brian Kelly just says things, and it's so maddening because I wish he would just say, hey, look, we didn't do a good job on Saturday. We got to do a better job of doing this, that, and the other thing. It's like he's so unwilling to admit that there was a problem that came down to, Jeff Quinn's coaching. He was like this with Ian Book last year. No matter what Ian Book did, he would never just say, hey, look, Ian didn't play well. Sometimes these guys don't play well. Trevor Lawrence had games where he didn't play well. He won't do it. So it drives me absolutely nuts. I don't understand it. I'll never understand why he says that. And to sit there and be like, hey, we didn't play well because of the loud environment. That's nonsense. That's a coaching problem. Get it figured out. You need to have it figured out. And, to me, that's a ridiculous excuse and one that I just wish he would stop using. I mean, 2019, Ohio State goes on the road at Michigan, runs for 264 yards. You're telling me Florida State was louder against Notre Dame than 115,000 Michigan fans were playing Ohio State? Come on. In a year where Michigan's, had some big wins down the stretch over Notre Dame, you're telling me that they weren't loud then? Come on. They ran for 368 yards at Nebraska. You don't think Nebraska's fans are loud? I get tired of hearing that from him. I really do. Get it figured out. Like every other good team's got it figured out. Matthew Hader, DJ Brown was a disappointment to me. I wish we would have kept the pedal to the metal all game. I agree. Dario Jones, did Avery Davis have a catch-all? No, he did not. Paul Rose, Brian, did you watch Rich Eisen's take on the game? I did not. I don't watch Rich Eisen. A couple times I've seen him on YouTube, but I haven't. If you want to share it, Paul, let me know what he said. But no, I didn't see his take. Andrew Goss. Also, Notre Dame ran probably the sexiest, one of the sexiest screens I've seen since Bama had a game-winning throw with Mark Ingram. It was pretty well done screen. There's no doubt about that. Matthew Hader says, who do you predict makes the biggest improvement from week one? You can include the coaches too. Let's say 1-0 and 1 on D. Who do I predict is going to make the biggest improvement from week one to week two? On offense, I'm going to say Kane Madden is going to make the biggest improvement from week one to week two. On defense, I think Kane struggled mightily on Saturday. I think a lot of that was playing with new players and some other things like that. I think Kane's going to have a really good game against Toledo. And on defense, I think the guy that's going to make the biggest improvement from week one to week two, I'm going to go with, I think Myron Tungvaloa. I think now having a game at defensive end under his belt, I think he's going to come out and have a pretty good game on Saturday against a team that likes to run the football. So that's going to be good. Robert says, I think they should start Rocco Spindler at guard. Your thoughts? I think it's too early to change the lineup. Again, I don't think it's the players. I think it's the preparation. And I don't think switching a true freshman in there is going to fix the problem. The problem is Jeff Quinn's got to do a better job getting them prepared. Simple as that. Jared Hardigan, what's your take on losing Kevin Bauman? Will Takis step up? I think Takis was going to end up being the number 2 tight end anyway. He was on the depth chart. I think Kevin's a good player, but we've never seen Kevin. I think George is a good football player. He just needs to get that opportunity and go out and do it. I wouldn't mind seeing more 12 personnel this week if it means you're going to throw out of it as well. I actually would kind of like that. They did a little bit of that on Saturday, but like if you're going to come out on a series and start 12 personnel and you want to get the run game going, okay, that's cool. But now go 4 verts, right? You get the ball to Takis and Mayer down the field. And I think Toledo's defensive philosophy is a little bit more conducive to Notre Dame being able to do that. Florida State was playing them in a way where the seams weren't really there, in my opinion. That won't necessarily be the case against Toledo. So I wouldn't mind seeing that, as long as it also means they're still going to be aggressive and still going to throw the football. Chad Williams says, if the O-line play is as inconsistent as it was against Florida State, what game or games will that come back to haunt them? Cincinnati, because Cincinnati can cover better than Florida State. I think it'll hurt them again. It'll hurt them against teams that can score. It'll hurt them against Virginia Tech. I think it could hurt them. It could hurt them against USC and North Carolina. It could hurt them at Virginia. Those are the games I think it could hurt them. And then Cincinnati. I don't think it'll hurt them against Wisconsin because I don't think Wisconsin is going to score enough to beat Notre Dame. But it'll hurt them, but I don't think it'll hurt them from the standpoint of losing a game. This is another thing. Spartan B88. Historically, Notre Dame has had bad experiences with hostile, loud away stadiums. Is it possible the O-line looking timid, catching on run blocking is a symptom of the silent count they might have been using? If it is, then they need to stop doing it because I don't understand why this is supposedly only a problem for Notre Dame. It makes absolutely no sense to me. And it's also just not accurate. I mean, there have been times they've had issues running the ball in big games, but there's also been plenty of times where they've gone on the road and ran the ball effectively. I mean, you go back and look in 2017, BC's got a pretty loud crowd. I mean, for a smaller stadium, ran for 500 yards. They went on the road. There's been plenty of times they've gone on the road against loud crowds and they've ran the ball effectively. Stop making excuses. Every other good team's able to run the ball against loud crowds. Figure something out. If the silent count's not working, then figure something out, right? Talk to people to do it and figure it out, get the stinking ball snapped, and stop making excuses for your offensive line not playing well in these environments, okay? That's a you problem. That's not a player problem. It's not a loud crowd problem. Figure it out, okay? They ran the ball against Florida State in 2014. They had no problem doing it then, so figure it out. Stop making excuses. I don't know why Brian Kelly continues to do this. It drives me nuts. And the reason they look timid is the same reason they look timid the entire 2019 season. It's a preparation problem. That's what it is. Nicholas asks, what are your grades Sunday for our center and guards? How can we improve? I would encourage you to go to irishbreakdown.com. I have my offensive line grades up on the website. How can they improve? Be more physical and better communication, which is just going to come with more experience playing together. I do think some of the issues we saw on Sunday night were just the fact that this group was starting to play together for the first time. We saw this in 2018 early. They were not good early in the season against 2018. By the fourth, fifth game of the year, they were playing much better. We should see similar improvement this year. So, just clean up, be more physical, and be more assignment correct. I mean, it sounds simple. It's going to take work, but it's a relatively easy to identify problem. You just have to coach them up and get them ready to play. Omar Ross says, I get it being frustrated as press. I applaud the way Notre Dame handles suspension issues. No need to announce it and have a guy name on the chyrons. Notre Dame should handle situations like Jurkovec the same. See, I strongly disagree with you on that because this doesn't help the player, okay? Jordan Botelho is a second-string defensive end. This isn't going to be on SportsCenter all day, okay? Sibo Flemish is the third running back, right? So what ends up happening, Omar, with all due respect, is these rumors start going and they just have a life of their own. I mean, I heard so many different rumors about why Kevin Austin didn't play in 2019. And the other thing, too, is if you just announce it right away, it will be discussed. It will be a front page story, and it'll be gone in a week. Whereas now we're still talking about it, right? We're going to talk about it next week when he's announced as unavailable, and it's going to become another thing. Just address it, okay? If the kid does something, there's consequences to doing things. We all know. We all heard it. We all heard the stories, and you pretending it didn't happen and just saying, oh, well, we're making coaching decisions doesn't help the kid at all. I think there need to be consequences when you make mistakes, and you need to own that, and it needs to be out there, and you move on from it. And you say they should have handled situations like Jurkovec the same. I don't know what Jurkovec situation you're talking about. Phil Jurkovec never got in trouble. Phil Jurkovec was one of the hardest workers they had. No matter what kind of character assassination they tried to do behind the scenes, Phil Jurkovec, from every player that I have ever talked to, was one of those guys. He was a hard worker. And then to come out and say he wasn't, to me, was a mistake. So I don't know what you're talking about there, Omar. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I'm if you don't mind kind of following up, I don't know what you mean by the Phil Jakovic situation. Lucas Chapman with a super chat. Appreciate that, Lucas. Said, since Notre Dame showed flashes in the passing game, do you think that will force future opponents to respect that? Will that free up the running game? It should, absolutely. I think there's two things that I'm looking at from this regards, Lucas. Number one is obviously the passing game overall effectively. It should help protect the run game more. The willingness to throw the ball down the field should loosen things up. Now, what I'm curious about is teams that play more to protect against the big plays, the down the field throws. Does that then open up a lot more crossing routes, more of the stuff over the middle? That's what I'm curious about in the pass game. Then if those things start hitting, then that's when we get into situations where you find out where, hey, look, now there's more guys there's more 6-man boxes or more 5-man boxes that you can then take advantage of. So, yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to have to go in reverse order a little bit this year. In the past, it's been running to set up the pass. Now it's kind of passing to set up the run. And I absolutely think that could be an effective strategy. Absolutely. I agree. I think that's very good insight. Very good insight. Craig Sebring says, I get people are not happy about the way the game went, but hey, would you rather have a win or a loss like what happened to Washington? Go Irish. I mean, look, obviously not everyone like that, but it also, just because they won doesn't mean we can't say, hey, look, you got to play better against better teams. I mean, I think there's a fine line to that. And this channel is going to be a place where we're going to talk about the good. And this is an area where we're going to be critical of things that need to be improved. And that's not just going to be me and Vince, but also needs to be you. Some of it goes a little over the line, and we'll address that and push back on that. But I do think, again, this is a place for critical thinking, right? And in a time period where we don't have enough critical thinking. And critical thinking means that even though you love Notre Dame, you're passionate about Notre Dame, as Vince and I are, it doesn't mean that you just accept everything as, hey, we won, right? Because you won this game, but this is what makes Bama special. And the players and all that, but it's their mentality is you have a standard that you're supposed to live up to. And it doesn't matter whether you win a game by 30 or win a game by 3. It's about meeting that standard. Notre Dame didn't meet that standard in a lot of ways on Sunday night. Now, they got the W. That's great. And it shows how far the program's come. And we point out a lot of good things. And there's a lot of fans that are happy. So you say, I know people aren't happy, but look, you're focusing on the number of people who aren't happy. That's a smaller number than the people that are happy. And I would encourage you not to focus on that. But then take the people that are unhappy and address those valid criticisms in a way that says, hey, yeah, you're right. This is good. This is good. This is good. But this has got to get better if they're going to start winning some of those big games. Joseph Salvatore, is there an off the field reason for Keys not playing, or do they just not want to put him in the rotation? There's no off the field issues that I'm aware of with Lawrence Keys. Nolan Esparza, as a former coach, what's the first thing you get to work fixing when you get back to practice on Tuesday? For Notre Dame, I'm going to be doing things where we're firing off the line on offense. We're coming off hard. And if you don't, that's 100%. We're firing off. And that's what I'm going to do. Pass game wise, it's just continuing to improve the timing. I think the route running at times got a little sloppy as they got tired. You started to see guys kind of getting into each other's zones a little bit more in the second half. And, so I think that was, I think that's something you can improve. Defensively, tackling and assignment correctness on the second and third level. Those are the two big things to me. We're going to have to see that. Jared Hardigan says, with Moala out, this now forces Prince into action. What's your take on how this positively, negatively affects Notre Dame this year and next? So actually, the Notre Dame 2 Deep came out today. It's on my website at irishbreakdown.com, and they actually had Prince Colley as the number 2 will linebacker. And so he's actually moved, it would appear, has moved over to will linebacker and is not playing rover now. And so you're going to see Isaiah Pryor and Jack Kaiser man the rover position. And I think you're going to see Prince Colley get a chance to train at the will position, which is where he is today listed on the 2 Deep. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see that. Definitely interesting to see that. We'll kind of find out if that's going to definitely be a continued long-term move or not. But I do think that ultimately that was going to be inevitable, because I think ultimately that's where his position is going to be best, just because of how his body has filled out and where those needs are going to be moving forward. Matthew Hader says, do you think Kane, because he's playing a team more to his level of play? I'd be lying to you if I said that didn't cross my mind, but it's more so just about the communication. I think Kane was probably the most physical lineman they had. I think at times he looked like he was uncertain of what he was doing, and that kept him from really coming off hard. I think also that first game with communication, talking to players, things like that. I think that stuff kind of had him a sloppy first game. I think now in game 2 with that experience, I think he's going to play better. I would have probably have picked him even if they were playing like Purdue this weekend. It wasn't about that, but I think that's going to help him be more effective, but I don't care about him blowing up guys from Toledo. I care more about where I was coming from, was more about assignment correctness, just being a little bit more certain of his responsibilities and picking those things up. So that's why I'm going to go with him. DBZ asks, what's up, coach? What do we need to do to improve the run game? I think they need to be more physical at the point of attack. I think this group of 5 needs to just continue to get more work together so the communication improves, so the timing of blocks improves. Getting off double teams is not just, hey, know what you have to do. There's a timing involved in it. There's a trust in the man next to you that, hey, I feel him there. I know he's there, so I can now work up to the second level. That just comes from experience. So part of this is just patience and just keep doing it, keep practicing it. It's why I don't think you should rush into a bunch of personnel changes. I don't think that helps you because I think then you kind of start over to a degree at those spots. So I think just being more physical, being more assignment correct, which comes from experience. I think there's some things they can do in the pass game to help improve the run game, more RPOs. I think that they can do things where, maybe get more of the quick perimeter stuff going where they got to chase. And then, fake a bubble screen, come back on a draw, some things like that, because they did have some success with that. But I think those are different things they can do. But at the end of the day, the line's just going to have to play better. If the line plays better, they're so good at running back. I mean, they were making yards out of nothing on Sunday night, which was really impressive. If you start just getting a little bit better up front, I think that'll lead to more success in the ground game. Mark 1, I see your channel is growing fast. Nice to see. I agree with you, Mark, and I appreciate that very, very much. Eric 1863, any update on Jordan B or any of the other guys out for the Florida State game? Nope, haven't heard anything. Notre Dame has not commented on that at all. Jared Hartigan says Notre Dame ran the ball pretty well on the road a few years back at Virginia Tech. Dex Williams to the house. Yeah, 97-yard run that game. And then he had another long run to put the game away in the second half. And that was a loud crowd. It wasn't any less loud than what Florida State was on Sunday night. Brian Denbo, if the O-line looks good Saturday, how much is preparation versus athleticism? I think is what you meant to say there. I think it'll be. It just depends on why they look good. Do they look good because they're just coming off and blowing them off the ball? That would be fine, but I want to see also that you're cleaning up some of those mistakes. So I think it's talent plus being better prepared and executing at a higher level. Christopher Sally says, I read your O-line grades and was surprised about Jarrett Patterson. I understand you guys have bad games. I understand guys have bad games, but what does he need to do to get back to playing at a high level? He looked rusty, so he's going to have to snap better, obviously, because that's out of the norm for Jarrett Patterson. But I feel like it's the same problem that he has with the rest of them. Look, when you're an alignment and you're not sure of what the guys next to you are going to do, and there's a lack of confidence in those guys next to you, it's going to impact you as well. I think that was part of it. I think it's going to come down to him getting his sea legs back, so to speak, after missing all spring. It's going to come down to him getting just more and more and more reps every day with the guys next to him. It's going to take some time. Jordan Schreiber, do you think Avery Davis is going to get some catches this game? And can Avery catch balls on the outside too, or is he exclusively up the middle? Yeah, he can do both. And yes, I do expect him to get some plays this weekend. I wasn't surprised that he didn't get catches last week because when you look at the routes they were running and you look at where Florida State was kind of loading up, there really weren't going to be a lot of opportunities for that slot guy, in my opinion, to make a lot of those catches, especially since the slot targets were going to Michael Mayer. I'm going to try to wrap these up. Jared Hartigan, did you watch the Penn State at Wisconsin game? Thoughts on Wisconsin? I thought Mertz had a up and down game overall. I mean, that's kind of what he's been since he had a great first game, but he's been very up and down since then. I thought Wisconsin was what I've been saying all summer. They're a big physical team that has no athleticism on the perimeter, none. And Penn State was the more athletic team, and they were able to shut them down. They also don't have that workhorse running back that they normally have. I thought that hurt them. They don't have any speed on the perimeter to take pressure off the pass game. And defensively, they're very good, very well coached, very physical. That's a concerning matchup. But again, they don't have speed on the perimeter. That's a team with like they're what Notre Dame used to be, and what people accuse Notre Dame of is they can't run. That is Penn State. I mean, that is Wisconsin, and look, the Penn State offense kept trying to give Wisconsin that game back, but the Penn State defense wouldn't allow it, and I thought they made some huge plays down the stretch, keeping Wisconsin out of the end zone. Aaron Harrison, I'm in Scotland. I know the game is on Peacock, but how could I watch the game over here? Go Irish. The only way that I know that it's available, Aaron, is on Peacock. I honestly do not know of any other ways to watch it. I'm not really knowledgeable of the streaming stuff or whatever else the options may be. If someone maybe in the chat has some advice for Aaron, I'd appreciate that, but I don't really have an answer. Chili asks, Brian, who was the last Notre Dame quarterback to throw for back-to-back 300-yard passing games? I think that was Ian Book, but I could be wrong. I know he had a bunch of 280s and 290s, but let me just go look at him. I believe it was Ian Book in 2018, but let me make sure I'm correct on that. Yes, it was Ian Book. He in 2018 against Navy, he threw for 330 yards, and then a week later against Northwestern, he threw for 343 yards. So the last quarterback to do that was Ian Book back in 2018, which was definitely the best season of his career. And I was, another example of quarterbacks just kind of slowly regressing. I'm actually looking at a couple quarterbacks. Tommy Rees did that in the first 3 games of the 2013 season. He actually had 3 straight games of 300 yards. So that would be the last time I believe anyone has done that. Kaiser never had back-to-back games of 300 yards. He had 321 and then 281, but never back-to-back 300-yard gains. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm correct. Incorrect. In 2016, he threw for 344 against Michigan State, 381 against Duke, and 471 against Syracuse. So Reese did it, Kaiser did it in 2016, and then Ian Book did it in 2018. Omar says, you hit it on the head. I don't like when Notre Dame put negative press out about guys like Jurkovec or anyone for that matter. The difference is they did that behind the scenes. They went to people in the media and spread things that I believe to be untrue about Phil Jurkovec. That was my issue with that. Simply saying, hey, look, this kid did this, or you don't have to say that. This is all, Omar, this is as simple as it is. Listen, we're going to keep this in-house, but, there are certain things, there are certain standards that are expected of our football players. And in certain ways, Jordan has lived up to that, but in other ways he hasn't. And therefore, he's not going to be available for us for the first 4 games of the year, or he's not going to be available for us this season. But he's going to be with the team. He's going to practice. He's getting his grades back on track. He's handling business. He's showing the maturity that we want to see. He's working past the things that have led to this decision. What that decision is going to be kept in house. But just so you know, he's not going to be part of the team, and it would go away in a week because you addressed it. We know he's not there. We're not looking at the 2 deep every week, see if he's in there. We're not waiting to get the alert on game day to see whether or not he's available or not. Right. And he's not on the 2 deep this week, so they won't have to say he's not available. He's just not going to be there. And so it's going to be like it was with Kevin Austin in 2019. We kept asking him week after week after week because we had no idea. And that's our job, is to ask these questions. And Brian Kelly could easily make this stuff go away by just saying what I just said. It's not that freaking hard, right? And you didn't say he did this, he did that. You could say, hey, look, he's doing some great things, but there's a couple areas he's still got to do better. We had a situation where, the end result is this, but he's going to be fine. He just, we're not going to have him this season. He's going to class every day. He's practicing his butt off. He looks great in practice. We can't wait to get him back next year. Say that, and this whole thing goes away. And then I don't have people in the chat asking me about it because we know. You don't have media people asking Brian Kelly about it because we know. It'd be very easy to say that. You don't have to throw a kid on the bus or say, oh, he did this or he did that, but you don't pretend like it's not there. You don't insult our intelligence by pretending it's not there and then get mad when we ask about it. Because otherwise, we're just going to go talk to our sources, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to find answers, and then we're going to put it out, and you're not going to be able to control the narrative at that point in time. So I just think it's another unforced public relations era for Brian Kelly that doesn't need to be there. And he does that way too much. And he's done so many great things, but that's just another example of you should have handled this so much better, and you've learned nothing from when you've done this poorly in the past. Oh, Graham, why Peacock again? I can only watch on my laptop because of my only improving vision. Well, I'm glad you're going to be able to watch the game, but it's on Peacock because basically people that are in charge realize, I think rightly, that streaming service is the future, right? Where at a time it was cable, right? The big money was in the cable, getting those TV contracts with NBC and CBS and then ESPN and Fox and all that stuff, right? Well, now streaming is the way to go. And that's the future. And what Notre Dame is trying to do is kind of sow that seed of, look, this is where it's going to be. And I think the success or lack thereof on this game is going to determine whether, hey, we can start doing this more or, there's some work to be done. But just prepare yourself, because if this doesn't go well Saturday, it's not going to be like, okay, well, we're never going to stream again. It's just going to say, okay, well, how can we do a better job of preparing this? That's what it's going to be. I mean, this is the future of this. Unless things take a completely dramatic different turn, this is going to be the future of it. Nathan Lytle, my prediction is for Kyle Hamilton getting 4 picks this year is on a good track to be true. I would say if based on the track of game 1, you've undersold it a little bit. But yes. Jonathan Kesmerick, I will be at the game Saturday, and I am stoked. Brian, has there been any changes at the offensive line since so far that you know of? I know Blake Fisher's injured, but has there been any other movement? I have not seen any. I don't expect there to be any. I did want to make a comment, too, for all of you in the chat. So we are still going to have our tailgate next Saturday, September 18th against Purdue. I'm going to put a poll on the YouTube channel. I'm going to put a poll on the Irish Breakdown message board. Either one of those two places, this is basically just going to be, are you coming or not? I want to just try to get an idea of how much food do I need to buy. I would like to be prepared for how many people are going to be there. So please go to the poll that I'm going to put up after the show on the YouTube channel. If you are a message board subscriber, go to the poll that I'm going to put up on the message board. But please don't do both, because I am trying to get an accurate count of who's going to be there. Because like I said, I don't want to buy way too much food. If think that 50 people are going to be there and only 10 show up, then I bought food for 50 people. If I buy food for only thinking 10 people are going to show up and 50 show up, then then that stinks too. So we're going to be taking care of everybody that's going to be there. There's going to be a lot of good food. I'm excited about it. My mom's catering it, and she's a phenomenal cook, so I'm excited about that. But I just needed to have an idea. So again, next Saturday, September 18th for the Purdue game, we'll be getting out there early. I'll have more details specifically on the time, but please look for one of those two polls and let me know if you plan on being there or not. So that way we have a better idea of the numbers. Welling Jeremy, this is a good comment. Defense almost seemed too fast and over pursued, causing missed tackles, but there were many missed tackles that need to get cleaned up. Yeah, I like that observation, Jeremy, because I do think that they were too aggressive at times. They were out of control a little bit, but the speed was there, and the speed was definitely there. Andy Scott says, I think Notre Dame fans are going to be surprised at the amount of Toledo fans that make the 2.5-hour drive. Toledo returns 21 stars from last year, and I think this game will be much closer than most think. Well, it depends. I mean, if you think it's going to be a 4-quarter game, then that would shock a lot of people. I don't think Toledo has that good of a program. I think they're probably the best or second best team in the MAC this year. They have a very good team. I don't see this being a game that's going to be competitive for 4 quarters. And if it is, that's a bad sign for Notre Dame. In regards to, I'm never surprised at how many people travel to Notre Dame games. I think most Notre Dame fans are not. Notre Dame fans recognize that this is a unique experience for people, and they want to come. It's kind of like the college football mecca for a lot of people. It's it's a place where everybody feels like they have to go at some point in time. So when your team gets a chance to play here, you're going to come. I mean, we've seen teams take over the stadium before. I would hope that most Notre Dame fans are not selling tickets to a Toledo person, but it is what it is. We've seen that before. Ryan Henke says the spread is 6.5 points versus Toledo. Anyone else think that's a little low? I'm not a spread guy, so I don't really have a comment on that, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Coach Hewitt asks, Curtis Hewitt says, Coach, how many games in your opinion does it take for the quarterback and pass catchers to be clicking on solid cylinders? I'd say probably three or four at the most if they're first-year guys together. About 3 or 4 before you really – because, again, it's about getting used to the game speed. They're clicking in practice, but game speed's different. Game timing is different. It usually takes about 3 games, maybe 4. DBC, do you think Mayer will catch 10 balls a game? No, I do not. Teams are going to start game planning for him a little bit more. All right, the DMK podcast, $50 super chat for the tailgate. Thank you very, very much for that. We have our first donation for the tailgate. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope that means that you're going to be there. I really would appreciate that, but I appreciate the chat very, very much. Obviously, that's going to be a nice little down payment on all the food that I'm buying for next week, so I appreciate that, DMK, very, very much. Pat Kowalewski says, we need to see more of Keys, get Watts in there, and get Lorenzo some run. This is the type of game where you build depth. Yeah, and again, just because you're Pat saying this and I'm saying this doesn't mean that we don't think the starters did a great job. I think they did a great job. I just also know that this is a long season, and you need to make sure that you have guys that can step in when there's injuries, guys that can maybe play, and especially in games like this, early, so you don't have to look, you're playing on short rest with 2 receivers who have been coming off injuries, right? It was a hot, humid night. Their legs are going to be tired. This is a great week to say, yes, we're going to get Deion Colsey some snaps early. We're going to get Lorenzo Styles some plays. We're going to get Lawrence Keys and Xavier Watts on the field. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Irish for life. Appreciate these kind words. Thanks, Brian and Vince. You provide the best coverage on the Notre Dame beat. The best part of all is your heart. I appreciate that very, very much. Craig Sebring says, I remember when Lou Holt's teams accelerated running the ball on the road. And his coaching staff figured it out. BK needs to stop with the excuses. I agree. Yeah, Tommy. Okay, now I see what you're saying. Let me get with you on that because I'm definitely interested in that. And I actually have a range here that I go to. I'm a member at a range here, so I'll get with you this week, and we'll chat about that. Jared Hardigan, do you foresee a Buckner package or two in the upcoming Toledo game, assuming we route Toledo early? I would like to see that. I think the way that Jack Cohn played on Sunday night is going to make that a little bit harder to justify. But yeah, I would like to see that. Curtis Hewitt says, did we come up with a resolution on the Pick'em League? I have not been on the boards lately. Yeah, the resolution was I got rid of the independent games. There's some people that did not see that. I did that a few days before the games. Some people did not go check their picks, so some people got zeros. But what we have is I have a thing where the first your 2 lowest scores get dropped anyway. So if you didn't make the change, don't just bail out. That week will be dropped, but it's going to be just top 25 games now. And we did not fill up that second league or anywhere close to it. But again, since there are low scores dropped, that does mean that you can jump in this week and just say, hey, look, you've only got 1 drop week left. But there's still obviously ability to sign up. So again, it's good to go now. We just got rid of the independent games, so we didn't have Holy Cross UConn. But when I made that change to a lot of people's request, it just canceled everybody's picks. So some people's picks didn't go through, or they got reset. They didn't remake them, but those will get dropped once you get a couple games under your belt. So don't panic about that. So just stick with us, stay in the league. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, goodness. Daniel Bunn, can we stop complaining about how hard it is to recruit? Charlie Weiss had a number 1 class in Notre Dame. No, he didn't. He had number 2 class. Why can't we land a top 5 quarterback recruit? Is that on Kelly? Weiss got 2. Number 1, I think Charlie Weiss was selling something that Brian Kelly didn't, which is that he worked with Tom Brady. Number 2, this channel never complains about how hard it is to recruit at Notre Dame. We accept the fact that it is harder at Notre Dame, but we've also said for years, ever since I've been covering Notre Dame, that Notre Dame should be able to recruit at an elite level. So this is not the channel to push back on when it comes to that. So I don't make that argument. I don't buy that argument. I've never said that it's too hard to recruit here. I think top 5 classes should be expected for Notre Dame. As far as top 5 quarterback, I mean, I think they've signed 2 recently. I think Phil Dracovic was a top 5 quarterback in his class. And I think Tyler Buckner was a top 5 quarterback in his class. The only reason he didn't finish in the top 5 is because he didn't play senior year. And had he played a senior year, I'd be willing to bet he'd be a top 5 quarterback. So I don't think recruiting quarterbacks has been the problem. I think they've recruited. Brandon Wimbush was a top 5 quarterback. Gunnar Keel was a top 5 quarterback. They have recruited top 5 quarterbacks. They haven't developed top 5 quarterbacks. That's the difference. I mean, Tyler Buckner and Phil Dracovic were both top 100 recruits. Brandon Wimbush was a top 100 recruit. Gunnar Keel was a top 100 recruit. Recruiting quarterbacks is not the problem. Developing quarterbacks has been the problem. Recruiting the right quarterbacks at times has been the problem. Paul Rose says, I saw Judkins is scheduled for an official visit this weekend. Wonder what the odds are of him committing. I don't know if he's a take just yet. I'm going to have to do some more digging on this, but I don't think it's a given that he would be a take. And I also think he's a kid that he's a smart kid. I think he wants to get out and see other places. I don't think he'd commit this weekend, but I like him. I think he's a good player. I'd have to think hard about whether or not I wanted to take him, but I would. If they did, I wouldn't be upset about it. I wouldn't, because I don't know where they stand with 2023 running backs either. That's also something you have to think about is if they don't feel good about the ability to get 2 of the 2023 guys, then I would strongly think about taking Quinshon, because I like Quinshon Judkins. I think he can play. I think he's a good football player. I don't like him quite as much as I like Logan Diggs, but he's a good football player. Brian Dembo asks, Coach, I have to ask, how much realistic prep can you do in a week regarding the O-line? You can get some. That's why I say it's attitude. It's just get work in. And the other thing, too, is this is going to be a shorter week because they played on Sunday. So there's going to be one less day to prepare. You can get a lot of work done in a week. Are you going to fix all your problems and all of a sudden you're going to look like the 2017 offensive line against Toledo and Purdue? No. It's going to take time. We talked about this in the previous show. I mean, 2018, it really took game 4 and 5 before they really got rolling. But you should see progress. You're just not going to see them from what they were on Sunday to just all of a sudden looking like the 98 Denver Broncos. They're not going to look like that. It's going to take time for them to get to that point. Brian says, I sound dumber than usual. COVID long hauler recovery. Sorry, guys. No need to be sorry. And you don't sound dumber than usual. It's a very good question. And I hope you're feeling better and hope you're on your path to being recovered and healthy. Carmine Burr says, do you see Zeke as correctable or should he be replaced if all goes well? Do you see Fisher and Carmody moving inside the guard or Carmody? I don't think Zeke should be replaced. I think he had one bad game on a line where everyone played a bad game. So if you're going to replace him, then replace everybody. I think you have to have some level of patience. If he continues making these same mistakes for 2-3 games into the season, then you consider replacing him. But again, I don't think Zeke's problem is Zeke. I think Zeke's problem is coaching. I think that's the issue. Trey McIntosh, any insight regarding the likelihood Collie can be effective in Freeman's system, given he has only been on campus for this summer? I think that's the question. I mean, when I talked to people this summer, it was they loved his athleticism and they loved his talent. It's just, can the light go on? Will the light go on in regards to, is he ready to play? Can he limit mistakes and those type of things? I think those are still the questions about him. And if he can get that answered, and look, sometimes you don't really find that answer out, Troy, till you get the kid on the field. I mean, we heard all summer about how Foskey's not this, he's not doing that, and then you put him on the field on the Sunday night, Tallahassee, and he plays well. So I think that's I don't know if I would throw him in there just yet, but as far as like a regular, but I think this is a perfect time to get him some reps against a team like Toledo. It's a good running team. It's not a team. It's not like New Mexico where you could play poorly and beat them by 50. You've got to play a good game if you're going to blow them out. But I would like to see Prince get some early game action this week. No question. Tommy Guns, this is a good question. Brian, when is the article coming out about must-do things on campus? It's going to come out tomorrow morning. So we're going to be a little closer to game day tomorrow. That's going to come out tomorrow. And again, I want to thank DMK Podcast for the big $50 super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. Sean McArdle says, Coach, is it possible Cincinnati has better athletes over on defense last year than Notre Dame does this year, or just a bad first game for Coach Freeman? Guys, last year was the third year under Marcus Freeman, okay? Third year. This was the first game. There were times in this game they were dominant. They were up 38-20 on the road at Florida State, and they stopped running the defense that had got them that 38-20 lead, okay? They're going to be fine, all right? If you look at Cincinnati, third year in that defense. There were no rookies on that defense. This is the first game. They played at Florida State. How do you think Cincinnati's team would have faced last year if they would have started the season off at a team like Florida State and it was the first game under Marcus Freeman? Relax, okay? Are there things to clean up? Heck yes. Are there things they got to get better at? Heck yes. Does Cincinnati have better players than Notre Dame? Heck no. Again, it was the first game under him for Notre Dame. First game. First game for the players with him. They'll be okay. They're going to be fine. All right? They got some issues that they got to work through, and they'll be okay. Right? I mean, the first in 2019, which is Marcus Freeman's third year, they played Ohio State, got beat 42-0, gave up over 500 yards of offense. Okay? They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Oh, I love the optimism of the Toledo fan. I do. I really appreciate that. But it's a good team, but that hasn't happened. None of those have happened under Jason Candle. That's the difference. Herney77, Northern Illinois just beat Georgia Tech. Not sure that was a great feat. That was not a great feat. It's a horrible loss for Georgia Tech. John Gallagher, what Notre Dame home game tradition are you most looking forward to this weekend? You know what? I'm going to have to talk to my wife about that because I'm actually going to the game as a fan this weekend, not covering the game. Boy. You know what? I think I'm just looking forward to tailgating and walking around and just enjoying the stadium. Normally I park and I got to kind of like make a beeline for the stadium. I think I'm going to get there early and just relax and walk around the parking lots, maybe go to the bookstore and just enjoy the atmosphere. I think just being a fan for a day is going to be fun. Now I'm going to still have articles to write and I'm going to cover the team and all that, but I have guys in the press box doing that. We're going to have a post-game show on Saturday. But I just think for just taking an hour and just being a fan for a little bit, I think that's something I'm probably looking forward to. That's not a tradition. That's just kind of where I'm at. And then John Gallagher also asked, bonus question, after seeing Cone in action, would you take him over Phil Jurkovec? I mean, I don't think that's a fair thing for me to say just because that's going to seem like I'm coming down on, like I'm being critical of Jack Cone. Look, I'll say what I've always said. If Phil Jurkovec would have stayed at Notre Dame and been developed, I think Notre Dame would be very hard to beat. Very hard to beat. And they would have been hard to beat last year. That's just my 2 cents. And you guys all know my stance on Phil Jurkovec. I think Phil Jurkovec's a special player. But I think Jack Cone is also a guy that on this team, it could be very, very good. And I'm not surprised by what he did on Saturday night. I'm surprised a little bit by the fact that they turned him loose the way that they did. That was a pleasant surprise. But I'm not surprised that Jack Cone made great decisions and was accurate and did all those things. Because he's got great weapons. And he took advantage of it. And he's a good player. But I think Phil Jurkovec's a special player. My opinion has never changed. And then you got Zen Buddha sending some wishes to Brian Dembo. Omar Austin, Angeli looks like it's a bit more zip on the ball so far. What do you think? He definitely has a little bit more zip. There's a little bit more. It's kind of normal junior to senior year progress. I think he's shown a little bit more pocket mobility. He looks to be in a little better shape this year than he was last year. Again, something that happens with maturity. As you get older, your body fills out, you get stronger. I think he's looked better there. I think his delivery looks a little cleaner than it did last year. His ball placement still isn't great, at least from what I've seen so far, but there's more zip coming out of the ball. There's no question about it. Not a cannon, but it's definitely gotten better. I'm gonna. This might be a troll, but whatever. I'm gonna answer it anyway. Angel Johnson asks, "Who is more beautiful, Alicia Keys or Halle Berry?" I choose Alicia. I mean, I just think I think they're both incredibly beautiful women. I tend to lean towards Alicia Keys just because of her beautiful singing voice. But those are two very beautiful women. I don't think that's a win-win situation on that one. Here we go. Searcher Green. Cincinnati had Luke Fickell as head coach. How much of that D was run by him? That was Marcus Freeman's defense. One game. A month ago, like 95% of people in this chat wanted to make him the new head coach, like right then and there. Now it's, it was Luke Fickell's defense. Come on, guys. Come on. My wife says Christopher Sally says trumpets under the dome will be outside this game and maybe all season. That's a bummer. My wife wants me to do that one of these days, but unfortunately I won't. I mean, if it's going to be outside, there's no point. Do you have to buy a parking pass? No, there's places you can pay for parking off campus, but you want to get there. You want to get there early if you're going to want to find a parking space. Okay. Carmine Bird, do you think behind closed doors BK ripped into Coach Quinn and gave him an ultimatum? Yes on the first part, no on the second. He rips on to Coach Quinn all the time. I've been told that he'll rip Coach Quinn in front of the players on the field, just blast them. Never did that to Harry. But he'll do that to Quinn. I don't like that. I don't think it's smart, but it is what it is. To give him an ultimatum? No, I don't think he's – I'll be shocked if Brian Kelly ever moves on from Jeff Quinn. I just don't see it. I don't see it. I think he'll be here as long as Brian Kelly wants him here. All righty. I think that is it, everybody. So I appreciate you all being part of the show today. Before you leave, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so that you know what time our show is going to be tonight. Also, if you have not signed up, please sign up for the message board. We've had a lot of signups this weekend. Like, our numbers took off this weekend before the game. It was a lot of fun. We had a great chat. We had a game chat, obviously, and that was a lot of fun. And so I look forward to even more people being part of that this weekend. And like I said, be part of the message board. Answer the poll question, okay, I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'm also going to put it on the message board. So just kind of let me know if you're going to be at the tailgate next weekend for Purdue. But I'll be walking around Saturday before the Purdue game a little bit. So if I see any of you, please say hi. I'll have my Irish Breakdown hat on. But if you see me, come say hi. So it'd be fun to meet some of y'all. But I'm really looking forward to next weekend when a lot of folks I hope a lot of folks are going to be there. Hopefully it's not just me, Vince, and my wife and parents hanging out. I hope some of y'all are going to be there. That'll be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to it and looking forward for this community to kind of come together in person a little bit and enjoy ourselves. But we can still have the virtual stuff going on, and we can do that at the message board. So if you haven't signed up, now's a perfect time to do so. So sign up and make sure that you hit the notification bell so you know what time our show is tonight. We'll be back tonight. We'll be doing our prediction shows tomorrow. And, of course, we'll have our Friday mailbag. So have a great rest of your day. I hopefully will see most of you, if not all of you, and more of you tonight when we have our defensive version of this stacking up breakdown.